Welcome, everyone. This is the Interagency Grizzly Bear Committee winter meeting for 2021. I can see folks are still popping in to the Zoom room. We're getting the panelists set up. My name is David Diamond. I'm the executive coordinator of the IGBC. And I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Buchanan, the Deputy Regional Forester in Region 2 of the Forest Service, who is the chair of IGBC.
Okay, thank you, David. And thanks to all of you who are joining today. Some of you are here because you're members of the exec or the subcommittees, exec team or subcommittees, and some of you are members of the public or other interested parties. And so we welcome all of you, and I appreciate your commitment, hopefully not just today, but for the next half of the next 3 days. I am Jackie Buchanan. My day job is Deputy Regional Forester for the Rocky Mountain region, but I am just hitting my 1-year mark of a 2-year term as chair of the IGBC. And so it's been a little different than what I expected. It's been almost 2 years since I think it is 2 years since we've had a meeting in person. So that is disappointing to me, like I think it is for many of us. But we're still dealing with COVID. And so having the flexibility to be able to still meet and discuss some really important topics while having to do it virtually, I just appreciate everybody's understanding of that. And hopefully, as we move forward this year, we'll be in a different place and be able to maybe operate in person once again. The purpose of the IGBC, of course, is to support the recovery, delisting, and ongoing conservation efforts around this iconic species, the grizzly bear, and their habitats. And it really is North America, not just the Western United States, because we are working and trying to work very closely with our Canadian partners. So this is an interagency, intergovernmental, inter-country initiative that we have. And there's a lot of strength that comes with that. And again, the input from our tribal partners and the public, who obviously care very deeply about the grizzly, hopefully helps us give as good effort as we can in helping to conserve and to protect the species and manage it appropriately. This is, I think, our 38th year. Is that right, David, of the IGBC, where I think 2023 will be the 40th year. So this has been going on for a while. We continue to refine, we continue, because things change and situations evolve, and we've got to adapt and grow with those too. And so a little bit of that is a bit of what you're going to see over the next 3 days as we think about where we are today compared to maybe where we were 10 years ago. In June, and it's been, I think, 6 months since our last virtual meeting. So back in June. And in June, we discussed, our structure, and we recognized, the work that the subcommittees, ecosystem subcommittees is doing is really critical and important. And we recognize that there may be some additional topics that we would all benefit from having some focus on. So we're going to spend a little time maybe exploring that, talking about that during the next 3 days. We're going to hear from David. So yay for David, right? So 6 months ago, we announced at our last meeting that David had accepted the job. He hadn't quite started yet, although we were rolling him in. And of course, David has been a long-standing participant and help in regard to, I think, the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So he's not unfamiliar at all with this work that we're doing, but we've asked him to step into this bigger role. So David has. And as a part of that, we have a website, an advanced website that David has really been putting some attention and focus on since he came on board. And he's going to spend some time with us next couple of days and talking through, what the changes have been, what information we have on there. And we're open to input of what else do we need to have on there that would be helpful for the public and interested parties and members of this group to be able to access easily on that website. So we're going to, as we move through this agenda, part of it will be David kind of walking us through that, and hopefully you will all be as excited as I have been to see that how that system operates and what I think it'll bring into the conversation. Tomorrow, we're going to spend a little time. We're going to hear from the Board of Review on tragic human fatality. We're going to discuss one of those, and we're going to look at how our programs and the work that we do are intended to help avoid those type of tragedies. And some of that's the bear resistant containers, information, education, outreach, and the possibility. One of the things we're looking at is launching a new Bear Smart community program, and what that may look like, and to get some feedback from all of you of what the value of that might be and how it could help us to avoid the loss of human life. And every one of us is committed to that. So we're going to spend a little bit of time during this 3-day event with you all to talk about that. And then Thursday, we're going to conclude with a discussion about our executive committee work plan for habitat science, IEO, conflict reduction, and the way we structure our collaborative work and allocate our shared resources. One of the things David's been focusing on is around the budget and how how we can best utilize, helping us think through how we can best utilize the funds that we have, and maybe what opportunity is there for additional funds and additional work, and how we should be applying that. So we're going to spend a little bit of time, I think, Thursday looking at that, looking ahead to 2022, and how we really renew this partnership that we have, and see where we want to be at the end of the next year. IGBC values the input from the public, and we have set aside time each day over the next 3 days to receive that input. Again, I ask everybody that we give grace in this virtual operating world that we're in. It's not always as smooth and as easy sometimes as if we were all in a room together, but ask that we all listen intently and be respectful. I know there's some deep feelings around the species, and we all share deep feelings around the species for those of us who are involved on this side. So we look forward to the public input, and we'll see what we get from that. As a part of things change and nothing ever stays static, we also want to recognize that we have some folks that are coming on to our executive committee, and we want to recognize those, and hopefully recognize those folks, and hopefully you'll get to see them over at some point in the next 3 days. But we want to recognize Deb Oakinson from the U.S. Forest Service Region 4. She's a new member coming on. She's out of Ogden. Jackie Groce, U.S. Forest Service out of Region 6. And then Hugh Morrison, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of the Pacific region. Those are the 3 new members that are coming on. And but if we have new folks coming on, that means we have some folks who are also maybe leaving, and we want to recognize them as they maybe spend their last bit of time with us. And I'd really like to recognize Bill Avey. Bill's been actually a longstanding friend of mine. He's retiring after a pretty impressive career with the U.S. Forest Service. And we want to thank him for his leadership on the NCDE subcommittee and congratulate him. He's made it to the other side. And so yay for Bill. It'll be a loss for us, but really appreciate all that he has done to help. And there are some other significant transitions within agencies and subcommittees, and we'll let the subcommittees maybe recognize some of the folks that are coming or going, if hopefully they're prepared to do that. And just want to say for myself, look forward to the next 3 days. This is very valuable time for me, both in my role as a deputy regional forester with part of the area of responsibility for habitat or species, where the species is, and then as the chair of the IGBC. Really look forward to it. And again, appreciate everybody's time and attention. So saying that, Mr. Diamond, I am going to gratefully turn this over to you for the moment to help facilitate the rest of today and the next 2 days to follow. Okay.
Thanks so much, Jackie. So we're going to start the meeting here with agency updates, and we'll do sort of the introductions and taking of the role as part of that, sort of go through the, recognize every single member here, every agency participating. And I'm going to follow the order that's on the agenda there. And so for each member, as you're recognized, if you could share your name, your organization, how long you've been engaged with this committee, anything that is notable or important from your organization or agency that this group needs to know about. And then also any recognition or kudos for staff or partners that you'd like to share with us today. So we'll start with the state of Washington.
Such fun for me to be number one. I am Hannah Anderson. I am the Wildlife Diversity Division Manager here at the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm really grateful to be here. This is about my, so this time last year, I was newly joined the IGBC. And so I've been here about a year now, engaged with IGBC and happy to be part of that work. I'm just going to give a quick update. I don't have a presentation or anything, just a quick update on some of the things we've been up to in the agency supporting grizzly bear recovery. And a lot of that circles around outreach and the work we've been doing. So in the Selkirks, a lot of efforts, largely collaborating with Defenders of Wildlife and the Kalispel tribe of Indians and the county, the Ponderay County and others on, bear spray presentations and living with bears presentations and engagement. So we had, we did have a small in-person bear spray training, but largely these are still virtual because of COVID, of course, that we're all dealing with. And we did put up a display in the local libraries in the area and gave out bear spray cans in those events. We've also been focused on engaging with residents and sanitation efforts. And so I think it was support from IGBC as well. We mailed postcards to residents, 4,000 residents in the area around sanitation and garbage management. And we've also been purchasing and distributing bear-proof residential garbage cans for folks. And we're continuing to loan out electric fencing for residents that are experiencing interaction or conflict with bears. And so we've been really focused in that area there, as well as doing some bear outreach in the North Cascades, largely now focused us on black bears, but in anticipation of any future time when grizzly bears, that work will certainly support their recovery as well. So partnering with Defenders of Wildlife and the Methow Bear Aware Methow Conservancy on a Bear Aware project there. So that's been really exciting and a new project, and I think some requests coming. And then finally, a great appreciation to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Kalispel tribe of Indians on the monitoring efforts in Washington. So the first ever adult female with yearlings was captured and collared in Washington, as well as a sub-adult male. So that was very exciting for us, and I'm excited to learn about where they go. And then we also work to set up hare corrals and monitor rub posts throughout 2021. So we're continuing to support that effort, and thanks for the help. And that concludes my update.
Great, thank you so much, Hannah. So next up is the state of Idaho, but we heard from Jackie that Toby Boudreau is not here this morning. Is there anyone who can speak for Idaho? Okay, we weren't able to arrange that. So we'll move then to Montana. Good
morning. I'm Ken McDonald. I'm the chief of the wildlife division with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and I've been either support or the representative on the IGBC for Fish, Wildlife and Parks for since 2007. I think I've been on the executive committee for about 8 years, off and on between other folks that have been on it. Probably for us, the biggest news I had Dave forward to everybody is yesterday, Governor Gianforte announced that the state of Montana is filing a petition to ask the Fish and Wildlife Service to consider designating the NCDE as a distinct population segment and then delisting that population segment. So that is ongoing and hot off the press. Some other things similarly hot off the press. We have a commission meeting next week on the Tuesday, the 14th. And at that meeting, one of their items, it's going to be a busy agenda, but one of their items is going to be approval of a revised tri-state MOA between Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana, which was something we did prior to delisting in 2017. And we're just revising it with the new revised Chow 2 numbers. That MOA basically describes how the 3 states will manage mortality, and particularly discretionary mortality, should bears get delisted. So we're going to be asking our commission to approve that next week. And then we're also going to be going through a rulemaking process to incorporate that the meat of that MOA into administrative rule, which gives it a little more regulatory certainty. At the same time, we're also going to we have in our rule or administrative rule, the demographic criteria that are in the conservation strategy for the NCDE. We did that back in 2017. We're going to open that up and add some clarifying language about hunting, and that hunting would cease if mortality thresholds are exceeded. That's kind of something that's in the GYE agreement. And so we thought that would beef up the NCDE one as well. So both of those will be before our commission on Tuesday of next week, and then we'll go out for public comment. A couple of the other things is at our last legislative session that ended in May, we had a couple things before the legislature. One was a pretty significant budget request to beef up our field staff, and the legislature granted that request. So in addition to what we received the previous session, we received funding for a trapping coordinator and a trapping technician to help with the monitoring program in the NCDE. We got base funding for technicians to help our bear specialists in Kalispell, Missoula, Choteau, and Conrad. We also got base funding for a bear technician to work in the Bitterroot, recognizing that bears are expanding in all directions, including in the Bitterroot. And so for once, we're trying to get ahead of the bears. And so a person in the Bitterroot will be focused initially on a lot of outreach and bear prevention work. So hopefully when the bears do get there, we won't be in the middle of conflicts and starting from scratch. And then we also got additional funding for all of the bear specialists, just for additional operations and supplies and things. So that was really positive. The legislature also, they passed a bill, Senate Bill 337, that has 2 parts to it that we're working on. One part says that the department cannot relocate a bear that's in conflict if it's captured outside of the recovery zone, any recovery zone. And so we've been working with Fish and Wildlife Service to develop an agreement on, just what does that mean? This bill has an effective date of March of 2022. So by next spring, we have to have things in place. And so we've got an agreement that I believe is now signed by both agencies that will kind of outline roles and responsibilities and different scenarios. So it's a bear that's in conflict and it's outside of a recovery zone, and it's the decision is made to relocate that bear, then the Fish and Wildlife Service will have the lead on relocating that bear. If it's in a recovery zone or if it's a non-conflict bear, then Fish and Wildlife and Parks would still move it. And then in terms of what our role is, our folks would still respond, if the conflict still respond, still deal with handling the bears and things like that. But if the decision is made to move it, then the Fish and Wildlife Service would have to come in and move it. So I think we got that pretty well worked out. The other part of that bill said that the department cannot relocate a bear except to commission approved relocation sites. So back in October, we brought a proposal to the commission with a list of relocation sites that we asked them to approve to put out for public comment. That list of sites was pretty extensive. It covered the Yellowstone, the NCD, and the Cavaniac ecosystems. It was developed in conjunction with our staff working with land management agencies, so the Forest Service, the BLM, the DNRC, state lands. That list went out for public comment. We were hoping to have it on the commission meeting in February for final approval, but the agenda just is getting too big, so we're going to postpone that till February. So we're going through the comments we received now. We're tweaking the list based on some of those comments, and then we'll be looking for final approval at our February meeting. And then we'll continue to work closely with our field folks, with their land management agency counterparts, that when we do have a bear, to make sure that everybody's in agreement. Okay, this is the place that bear will go. The one other thing, sorry I'm being long here, but there's all of a sudden a lot going on in the world of grizzly bears, is with our wolf seasons, the commission adopted a trapping season date, a floating date for occupied grizzly bear habitat, that trapping wouldn't start until pretty much till grizzly bears are in their dens. And so the earliest trapping could have started was November 29th. The default, if nothing changes, would be December 31st. So we're working on a weekly basis with our bear specialist. What are we seeing for bear activity from collared bears, from conflicts, from encounters with hunters and recreationists and stuff, and then we'll make the decision on when to open wolf trapping, so that we minimize any potential for incidental take of grizzly bears by wolf trapping. So yesterday we summarized where we were. We still have a lot of bear activity across the range and all of the ecosystem. So we have not opened the wolf trapping, and we'll evaluate on a weekly basis. So all of that said, that's kind of what's going on. The last part David asked for is recognizing staff. And I just wanted to point out, since our last meeting, we've lost or had a retirement of Kevin Fry, who was our bear specialist for decades in the greater Yellowstone. Tim Manley, who's the bear specialist out of Kalispell, and has been a real foundational piece of bear recovery, is retiring this month. And Mike Maydell, who was on the Rocky Mountain front, is no longer working with us. So we've had a pretty significant turnover in our bear expertise. We've got some good folks coming up behind, but that's kind of a big blow across the range all at once. So kudos to those guys. I think they really got us to where we're at in the large part, and I just want to recognize their contributions. Happy, if there's any questions, happy to answer.
Great, thanks so much, Ken.
Yep.
Let's go to Wyoming. And then before Wyoming, if I could ask the members of the committee, in Zoom, if you hover over your picture, there's a little 3 dots, and you can scroll down to rename yourself, and just put your affiliation there, so that new members and the public can see who everybody's representing when we speak. So with that, I will turn it over to Wyoming.
Yeah, thanks, David. This is Rick King. I'm the Chief Game Warden and Chief of the Wildlife Division for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And I've been with IGBC for about 2 years now. Came on shortly after taking the role of Chief for Wyoming. Ken already mentioned the work on the Tri-State Memorandum of Agreement, so I won't spend too much time on that, but I do want to say thank you to Idaho and Montana for working with us to develop that draft MOA. I think most folks probably know that the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission approved the Tri-State MOA on November 30th. And as Ken mentioned, you know, the two primary revisions to that MOA were to address the annual mortality rates based on an updated revised Chow-2 population, and then to also make a clear commitment to translocation to ensure genetic health. Both those issues were brought up through the court process, court appeals, and as you all know, Governor Gordon has indicated that Wyoming will be filing a petition to delist the GYE in the near future. I do want to mention that this summer we had an amazing opportunity to do some aerial capture work in the Washakie Wilderness. Dan Thompson and our entire large carnivore crew, Dan Bjornley and others, were able to help coordinate that event with a ton of thanks to the Shoshone National Forest and a lot of folks in the forest system to allow that work to happen. We had a really remarkable couple of days of success, and we're able to capture 5 females and 5 males in that Washakie Wilderness, which, you know, if you looked at a map of the kind of holes in our data collection based on, you know, research and management trapping, that was one place where we had a bit of a gap. And so being able to conduct that aerial darting work really helped provide some great additional information. So huge thanks to the Forest Service and also to Kyle Jolly. I believe he's with the Park Service, and he served as the darter for that capture operation. And Baker Aviation did a remarkable job of pulling that off. So thanks for that great work. We have had a few personnel changes. So Dusty Lassiter was our Bearwise coordinator out of Cody for a long time. Many of you probably recognize his name. We appreciate all the work that he's done. He's moved on to different opportunities, and in his place, we've actually have 2 new folks or newer folks in Cody, Phil Quick, and then also Kyle Garrett is going to be our new Bearwise rep for the IGBC. So I'd like to welcome those guys. With that, just other, you know, in general, we continue to hear a lot from livestock producers and others in terms of damage issues regarding grizzly bears. We're taking a look at our damage compensation rates that we pay, and we may bring forth a recommendation for some slight changes to our commission in 2022 based on ongoing research. So with that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick. And let me see if we've got, I don't know if we do, folks from the Canadian provinces. Anyone from Alberta? How about British Columbia? Okay, so that brings us to the Forest Service. We'll work on that going forward. Jackie, I saw your expression there. But Jackie, why don't you start for the Forest Service, and we'll move through the federal agencies now.
Yeah, so for us, and Rick just mentioned, you know, we did what we could this year to help, you know, with collaring and giving some clearance for areas, in wilderness and whatnot, so that that critical work could happen. We were working closely, I think, with our partners to the west, Region 4 on the Bridger Teton, with the whole 399 and, which direction was she going to go, and never quite came over there at Du Bois to our side. But, we're doing what we can on our side, and working with Region 4 and Fish and Wildlife Service and Wyoming Game and Fish to deal with that situation. We've had a lot of loss this year, and talking to Lisa Timchak, and the numbers that we've had of conflicts this year up on the Shoshone, it's significant. And so, I think that's why when I did the opening comments, I talked about what can we do to reduce the conflicts or limit, and is it education, is it the Bear Smart communities, whatever we can do, we're just committed to, because as we see the conflicts rise, it's not good for the bear, it's not good for the public, it is not good for the agencies, it just creates a struggle. So we're continuing to be open as requests come in. Matt, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, a couple of times got calls. I got called this summer, and we're willing to do just about what we can within the realm of the legal world to assist in the management, conservation, and protection of both the public and the bear. So we'll see what the year comes. I'm concerned with the lack of precip and the snow, and what that, the warmer temperatures, all that, who knows what's going to come with that for the bears, and wildfire continues to, we were popping fires this weekend, and it's middle of December. And so from a habitat standpoint, there's concerns from a change of climate and what we're experiencing in this changing world. Just creates, some real struggles for us. But, we continue to, keep the torch going, and we're open as folks need to call and reach out. We'll be as responsive as we can. So I think that's what I would say for Region 2 and our part of the world on the Shoshone. Oh, and Jackie Buchanan, U.S. Forest Service, Deputy Regional Forester in this role.
Thanks. I see Deb Okeson camera. Your camera is on. So Region 4 of the Forest Service, and welcome.
Thank you. I am Deb Okeson. I'm a Deputy Regional Forester in the Intermountain region, Region 4, and joining the committee new. Also, we've got Elise Boki joining us, who is our Director of Natural Resources, who will be working with the committee as well. And I don't have any additional updates beyond what Jackie had shared, so thank you.
Great, terrific. Is Region 1 on the line, and is there anything additional for the Forest Service from Region 1?
Hey, good morning all. Melanie Glossa. I am one of the Deputy Regional Foresters in Region 1 out of Missoula. And, Jackie did a really comprehensive sort of update for us in the Forest Service, so I don't think I have anything in addition to add. And, as far as my, how long have I been with the IGBC? Has it been 2 years in this capacity? And then I was fortunate to be a forest supervisor on the GYC. Anyway, for, I don't know, it's 5 or 6 years. Anyway, so a while in that capacity. Anyway, good to see you all. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Melanie. Next up is the Park Service, National Park Service.
Good morning. Hopefully my camera works, and it doesn't. So you get to see a bison, or else I'll probably just close it off. My name is.
We lost your audio there, Jennifer.
Sorry, I clicked the wrong button. I am the Associate Regional Director for Resource Stewardship and Science for the Park Service Intermountain Region. And I've got my experience on IGBC has been for the last 2 years. I have been also on the YES subcommittee in a different role for about 5+ years. so involved with grizzly bear management issues for 7 to 8 years. I wanted to give a quick shout out before I get into updates to Matt Hogan, Hillary Cooley, and Wyoming Game and Fish, and also Bridger Teton National Forest for their work, as Jackie mentioned, on Bear 399. That bear normally resides in Grand Teton National Park and has 4 yearling cubs, if you all don't know, which you probably were hiding under a rock if you don't know. And that bear has caused quite a stir over the past, well, most recently with going down into Jackson and surrounding areas and unfortunately getting some food rewards and whatnot. Bear is internationally known, as we are aware. And Hillary specifically, and Matt and all the other agencies, Wyoming and Forest Service and Grand Teton, really stepped up to work on the management of that bear and her 4 cubs to keep her as best as they could out of trouble and moving back into denning, hopefully in the park. She's not quite denned yet, as we understand, but she hopefully will be soon. And those 4 yearlings will be out on the street, so to speak, next summer. So we'll have to see what happens with them. But I just wanted to give a big thank you to all of those folks for their really intensive work with Grand Teton National Park and those efforts on 399 this year. For updates for the 3 parks in my region, Glacier, Yellowstone, and Grand Teton. Glacier, the only sort of information of note is Jeff Mao, the superintendent of Glacier, is going to be retiring. Kate Hammond, our regional office deputy regional director, is going to be serving as the acting superintendent of Glacier. They don't have a replacement for Jeff yet, but they're going to be working on it. The park's in great hands with Kate for the interim, so that's just an update there. Also seeing increased visitation, of course, across all of our park units, especially those 3. Glacier did implement a pilot timed entry system this past summer, and we'll be doing that again next summer to help ease some of the congestion woes in the park itself, which then could help translate to maybe some reduced conflict with bears, et cetera. But that's just an update for Glacier. For Yellowstone, it's similar in the sense of increased visitation, and they didn't have any, that I'm aware of, any really significant conflicts and or removals of bears inside the park specifically, but that team works really hard with the state of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho states, and we appreciate all the assistance with the states in that. Grand Teton, I've already mentioned 399 and all of the issues going on there. There was the Togety Pass bear issue also that was outside of the park, but adjacent to the park, same entities involved with the management of that bear. And I think a couple of cubs, if I remember. Also, and this week, we'll be talking about this later, I think in the agenda, is the Bear Smart communities. And Jackson and Teton County and Grand Teton National Park are very, very interested in engaging on that and maybe could serve as a good pilot for that concept. I've had Chip Jenkins, who's a superintendent at Grand Teton, engage with Matt. And David, maybe you want to step into the picture too, as we potentially flesh out that idea moving forward. I think it's a great opportunity. That's a really high profile community, as most of us know, and they are having major issues with bears, and Teton County does not have any bear food storage regulations at this point. And so that could be a great pilot to move forward. Lastly, I want to mention that I am going to be transitioning out of IGBC, sadly. I am moving out of my role as the ARD for the regional office and moving back into my old role as chief of the Yellowstone Center for Resources at Yellowstone National Park. So I'll be seeing a lot of you at the YES subcommittee meetings where I used to work. And I'm super excited to go back to the GYE. It's been my home for many, many years, and I'm very familiar with all of the bear and other resource issues there. I've so enjoyed my time with you all, and I'm very sad to leave this post because I've really enjoyed it. But we'll continue to engage in grizzly bear management on the YES subcommittee. So thanks for the opportunity to update. I'm not sure if Karen Taylor Goodrich is on, so I don't have any updates for that region or that part of the world, David. So not sure where to go with that. And you're on mute.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. And I don't see Karen on. And so that means next up is the Bureau of Land Management.
Hi, good morning, all. I'm Mike Philbin. I'm the Deputy State Director for Resources and Planning for the BLM Montana Dakota State Office. The big news from here is that our state director from Montana Dakotas, John Melhoff, will be retiring at the end of December. This position just opened up on USA Jobs yesterday. So looking for high quality candidates, of course, for that very important position. I've been on the IGBC for 4 years now, and unfortunately, this will be my last meeting. I'm planning on retiring at the end of February. So I'll be looking for a replacement for myself to fill in on the committee. It'll likely come from Montana Dakotas. Yeah, those are the two big personnel type of matters. Katie Stevens, our Western District Manager, who's also on the NCDE and the YES, is currently acting as the Associate State Director down in Idaho. And we'll expect Katie back in Montana, after the first of the year, probably at the end of January or so. But folks been looking for Katie. That's where she's been hiding out, down there in Boise. Yeah, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. The U.S. Geological Survey.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. I'm Claudia Reagan with the USGS. I'm the Center Director of the Northern Rocky Mountain Science Center. And I think it's been about 5.5 years since, maybe a little more, maybe we're getting close to 6 that I've been with USGS and here with the IGBC. So some updates from us. I first of all wanted to mention that barring complications from Omicron, I'm just really excited that we're finally able to see some changes in our COVID-19 response posture. We're working on re-entry to the office to occur between early January and March. I'm expecting to have 75% of us back in the office by mid-February. And the really exciting news is that travel and meeting restrictions are now eased so that we can begin, or at least fully vaccinated folks can begin a return to travel, to meetings, and in-person engagement and partners. So it's really that last piece that I thought it was important to mention that here. On the science front, this has been a really productive period for our work in the GYE and throughout the range. You know, I don't know if maximum telework has contributed to maximum productivity, but we have seen a lot of great science coming out. Importantly to note that IGBST saw a culmination of a multi-year effort to enhance population estimation and monitoring of the GYE. They released a comprehensive report in April. As a result of those findings, they have now implemented changes to the Chow-2 estimation process. And I believe that Jim White will offer more detail on that when he gives the Yellowstone Ecosystem Subcommittee report later today. Associated with that, and kind of as a next phase, the IGBST is working on implementing those population estimation enhancements into an integrated population model. And I believe Jim may also cover that briefly during his comments. Let's see, on the personnel front, we do have a new member of our team here at USGS. Matthew Gould, a biologist, just started with us just this week, I believe. It's really weird to have new people coming on board and we're all virtual and you can't walk down the hall and say hi, but I think Matthew's now on board. He's coming to us off of postdoctoral work, I believe with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I do recall that he has very strong analytical skills and experience in working with a range of partners. So he's going to be a real asset to our bear study team, and we're happy to have him on board. That's it from me, David.
Thanks so much, Claudia. So last but not least is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks, David. Matt Hogan. Ken, I think you have me beat with total years of service, but I think consecutive service, I think I win that award on the IGBC. I've been on it since 2013, and I had no gray hair when I started. Not saying there's any correlation there. And Jennifer and Mike, sorry to see you both leave. We several of us were conspiring about who the next federal vice chair will be in a year, and you guys are both pulling out before we had a chance to have you step up. So more work to do, but we'll miss both of you. Lots of folks have talked about 399 and a little bit on 863, and with the danger of falling into the trap of everything's been said, but not everyone has said it. I just wanted to maybe highlight a little bit more there and give some kudos. And I will say that both of those efforts to me really represent the power of the larger IGBC, as it was an all hands on deck for both 863 and 399. Starting with 863, well, I'll start with Hillary Cooley, which is why I'm giving the report and not her, because she really deserves an incredible amount of kudos. She has almost permanently relocated from her home in Montana to Jackson Hole to deal with 399, and earlier this summer did something similar for 863 on Togety Pass for a smaller extent of time. But Hillary has pretty much been in Jackson since the middle of October and is still there now. And as folks have said, things are looking pretty positive on 399, and she appears to be, if not in the den, close to it, which is great news for everyone. But the effort that Hillary put together to establish a capture operation that resulted in us catching the royal we, catching 3 of her cubs, collaring 2 of them, and then keeping tabs on the family from that point through her relocation site to up in the park has been pretty significant, including a parade that 399 led through downtown Jackson in the middle of the night that some of you may have seen made some national news, but also a video from the Teton County Sheriff's Office that they picked up on their security camera to the song of Yogi the Bear. But as I was saying, it really was an incredible joint effort, and I think everyone on the IGBC who has a nexus to Wyoming was part of the effort, starting with Wyoming Game and Fish, who did a lot of the work on both 863 and 399 leading up to Hillary stepping in. But USGS, every single person, USGS, Claudia and her team were great. They sent folks up there who really helped lead the capture operation. The Park Service, both Grand Teton and Yellowstone, were a huge help. Everything that Hillary and crew asked for, they were quick to help. Same goes for the U.S. Forest Service on 863, as Jackie mentioned, but also on 399. It really was an example of a true team effort. And while some may quibble about the amount of resources put into the protection and management of in essence, a few what I would call celebrity grizzly bears, I think not only was it the right thing to do, it both turned out to be, in my mind, while controversial with some, incredibly successful. So I think all of our partners deserve a great deal of thanks. Incredible amount of effort, not what Hillary would normally do in her day job, but she stepped into the breach quickly when asked and did a great job, as did Wayne Casworm, because Hillary did have to step away for about a week for some personal reasons, and Wayne stepped up and filled in and was actually on site when the team DOI actually captured the 3 cubs. So an incredible effort, and just kudos to everyone involved. And thank you so much for the support. As I said, never was any request for help denied, and it was often followed with, tell us what more we can do and we'll be there. So really a great effort, and a great ending on both cases. So thanks. Did I leave you speechless, David?
Okay, anything else then from
No, I think we're good from the Fish and Wildlife Service perspective. I think in the interest of time, we're good to move along. So thanks.
Okay, well, we need to introduce Hugh Morrison. Hugh.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I'm Hugh Morrison. I'm the Deputy Regional Director for the Pacific Northwest, Pacific Islands, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of Portland, which includes Idaho and Washington. And glad to be joining the IGBC. This is my first meeting, so just coming on board. I don't have anything to add to Matt's excellent recap of where we are with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in terms of grizzly. I wanted to say thank you to you, David, for helping to onboard those of us who are new to the IGBC. Really appreciate that effort. And I guess I would say one note on a staffing note, I will say that we are happy and lucky to have recently brought Jody Bush into our region as our Deputy Assistant Regional Director for Ecological Services. Jody, as you all know, worked for many years for the service out of Montana. So glad to have her and her expertise on grizzlies with us here in Region 1 now. So I think with that, I'll round it out for my introduction.
We're almost to the point where we're ready to forgive you for that, Hugh.
I appreciate your kindness, Matt, and you're not beating me too hard on that one.
Well, thanks so much. And it's clear that there is a tremendous amount going on here in this grizzly bear world. Transitions as always. I guess having heard the updates, are there any questions that you have for each other, or follow-ups to the updates given this morning? Okay, well then we will move on with our agenda. Again, the goal today is the snapshot of the status quo. So you heard what's happening in the individual agencies. I'm going to give you some background on some of the work that I've been doing, and then we're going to hear this afternoon from the subcommittees. Then tomorrow we dive into programs, and then on Thursday thinking about 2022 and actions for this committee. But the key part, of course, with things that are ongoing work is the subcommittees. And Jim White, who is the chair of the Yellowstone Ecosystem Subcommittee, he's got a conflict later today at the point for the subcommittee report outs. So we're going to go a little bit out of the agenda order and hear the Yellowstone Ecosystem Subcommittee update now. Appreciate, Jim, the opportunity to hear from you.
Okay.
And Jim, I think you want me to put the slides up. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll have you do that, David.
Okay.
And I'll just tell you when to switch from them. Anyway, so I'm Jim White. I'm a regional supervisor for Idaho Fish and Game in Idaho Falls. And I am also the current chair for the Yellowstone Ecosystem Subcommittee. First, I want to thank David and Jackie for letting me go a bit early today. In about an hour, I have to spend some time at my office with about a dozen Idaho legislators. So I think I probably should be there. So anyway, I had to step this up a little bit. I also wanted to let folks know that the current vice chair for our subcommittee is Mary Diaversa with BLM, also in Idaho Falls. I think Mary may be new in that position since last time I talked to IGBC. So this presentation, I'm going to try to go as quickly as I can, but just like a lot of people have already said, there are a lot of things going on right now and with grizzly bears. And for 2021, there was a lot of things that happened within the YES subcommittee. So I did part of this presentation, but I also have to admit that I plagiarized a bunch of these slides from some other people's presentations that were done in November to YES. And so they did the majority of the work, and I just get the task and the honor of presenting the material. So next slide. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about some of the important items that YES worked on in 2021, and I'm going to blend into that kind of the work that we're thinking regarding those items in 2022 and a couple other items we may take on. I'm also going to give a population update for the Yellowstone ecosystem, and I'm going to talk about some improvements in monitoring that the science team has been done, which Claudia mentioned. And then I'm going to try to just give a quick few answers to some questions that David gave to the subcommittees. So next slide. So one of the things that the YES subcommittee did this year was we formalized some of the work that we're doing, maybe in, I guess what I would say is we made more formal work groups for some of our big, heavy work items. And the reason we did that was because we still had people working on stuff, but we tended to meet twice a year, and we would basically talk about what we talked about the previous meeting and have a little bit of work done in between. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to step up that, maybe get some things accomplished a little faster, really concentrate on them. And so we designed some work groups, some small working groups, and it's basically up to the chair and the vice chair to check in once in a while in between the main meetings for YES with these groups to see how they're doing with progress and kind of see what we need to talk to the entire YES committee with. And I got to say, I think this has worked really well. It's not that we didn't use smaller work groups in the past, we just formalized it a little bit more and put people in charge as a lead and maybe a little bit more communication between meetings on it. So the current working groups that we have is Backcountry and Hunting working group, who Lisa Chimchek is the lead on. We have the Livestock Conflict working group, who Tricia O'Connor is the lead on, and we also have a working group related to some changes in language with developed sites in the conservation strategy, and Tricia O'Connor is also leading that one. And then we also have, of course, the science team doing some work, and I'll talk a little bit later about some work that they're doing regarding some improved monitoring efforts. Next slide. So the Backcountry and Hunting working group, just wanted to talk about a few things that they're doing. So one of the things that has been identified for a long time is that we needed more consistent language in food storage orders across the ecosystem. And so this group took that on with gusto in 2021. And basically they got to a point where pretty much worked through all of the forests within the GYE and got consistent language agreed to for food storage orders on those forests. And that's been through the majority of the Forest Service review process. We expect those food storage orders to be signed sometime this winter and go into effect this spring. We also had the YES members for Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. We gave them the language for those food storage orders, and they gave us some input to use. And so we're almost to completion, at least on the Forest Service portion of the food storage orders in the GYE, which is, I think, a big accomplishment. And I'm pretty proud of folks for doing that. One of the things that this working group is going to do in 2022 is just kind of assist BLM with maybe trying to get some good food storage order language in their rules, and also try to have that as consistent as possible with the ones on Forest Service. So they're going to try to tackle that a little bit in 2022. Another item that they worked on, which I wouldn't say that was a tough one to work on, but it was needed, is the Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association video that I'm sure everybody on IGBC has looked at, which is a really good video about being around grizzly bears during hunting season and in the backcountry. They just looked at that and where we were sharing that, kind of got links on the right websites, and just kind of made sure that we were sharing that as widely as possible within the GYE. And that'll continue in 2022. One thing that was identified with one of our working groups in 2021 was that we needed to put a little bit more effort into having consistent signage for educational things regarding grizzly bears throughout all land ownerships in the GYE. And so we're going to take a little harder look at that. Not that that hasn't been happening already anyway, but maybe just kind of concentrate on that a little more in 2022. Next slide. So the livestock conflict working group with Tricia O'Connor in 2022, we kind of got to a slow start with it. It wasn't any issue with Tricia's part. It was basically, she did take on a lot of work, plus she is also a forest supervisor. And so she had a lot going on there. We also didn't have a lot of participation originally in that group early in the year. And so mainly what happened with this group is they identified some work objectives that they need to accomplish for 2022. And one of the big things that happened was they had discussions with the Wildlife Services directors for Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. Talked to them about things that they were doing related to conflict management and wildlife. And then they also had those same directors speak to the YES subcommittee at our fall meeting, which was quite interesting. And they mainly talked about preventative measures and non-lethal techniques that they were using to, resolve some conflict between livestock and grizzly bears. And so in 2022, this group is going to, we're going to try to get more people on the working group, both within YES And outside of the S subcommittee, we put invitations out to really anyone that would like to get involved with this, including NGOs, wildlife services, I think now will be involved in that group. We're reaching out to landowners and producers so that we kind of get a good diversity within that group to work on things. And that group in 2022 is just they're gonna refine some work objectives and try to get busy knocking some things out related to this topic. So next slide. So one of the big things that's happening, and I reported on this last year, is the working group that we have with related to developed sites and language within Chapter 3, the habitat standards in the 2016 conservation strategy. And this isn't new. This is work that's been going on. It was recognized in 2016 during the signing of the conservation strategy that needed to take a bigger look at this. And folks have been working on it for a long time, but we did have some real significant progress in 2021. And I want to talk just a little bit more about this. I know I did it a year ago, but I think it's really important for some understanding, and partly that why it's important to work on, why YES needs to be working on it, and I'm pretty proud of the progress that's being made. We're getting to completion on this. So next slide. So mainly the working group is made up of federal folks. We're mainly talking about language that talks about facilities on federal lands, and kind of sideboards that have to do with those facilities related to grizzly bears. Next slide. So developed sites basically include things like campgrounds, picnic areas, lodges, restaurants, and so forth that are, like I said, they're on mainly federal lands in the GYE. Next slide. They also include administrative sites like ranger stations, headquarters buildings, employee housing, maybe a maintenance shed, that sort of thing. Next slide. So the biggie that this group is working on, and the change that relates to the language here that we're proposing to change in the conservation strategy, is currently those sites are identified with a dot on the map, kind of in the center of the site. And there's not a lot of relationship to the entire area of the site. And so we're proposing to move more towards footprints, or some might say polygons, for each site. Next slide. So what the advantages to these footprints are, they more accurately represent the facilities at the site and the human presence on these sites. It defines an area within the polygon or the footprint that you could actually do potential expansion on with facilities. It still has sideboards to it, and it provides for a little more management opportunity to manage for all the increased visitor use that folks have been doing on public lands throughout the nation, really, but especially within the GYE. Next slide. So one example for a footprint would be at Old Faithful. You see in the middle here, there's a red dot, and that is what represented this site in the past. And the proposal is to basically have this footprint or polygon around the site to better better describe what the site actually is. Next slide. Here's another example where the dot would have been in the middle of this campsite, and the proposal says that we would like to have a polygon around it, better representing the site, and also within that polygon, it also allows for opportunity for maybe some improved facilities and that sort of thing. The one thing that really is not changing is there's still sideboards related to these sites, what you can and can't do. And so I think this is a really good way to describe the sites, but it still keeps the restrictions and sideboards and that sort of thing related to good conservation for grizzly bears. It still keeps that within the conservation strategy. Next slide. So what's going to happen now with this is it's been through review within the Yes subcommittee. The subcommittee agreed to take it out for public comment, and it's now, right now, it's out for public comment until the end of December. And then what we will do is this group and the rest of the Yes members will look at any comments we got, any input we're still receiving from other agencies and so forth. We'll look at that this winter, and our intention is at our April, I think early April Yes meeting in 2022, this next spring, is to incorporate the input that we've received this winter and have a final for Yes to vote on it as far as changes for language in the conservation strategy. Okay, next slide. I'm gonna just spend just a little bit of time on a population update, which is one of the things that David asked us to do. So the population estimate, the current population estimate for 2021 in the GYE is 1,069 grizzly bears. The number for this actually could increase just slightly because we're not totally towards the end of the year, but probably not going to increase very much. The important thing to note with this is, as Claudia mentioned, is that the science team worked on some improvements to the Chow-2 estimator that they use to estimate populations with, and which was a very conservative estimation. And so what you see here is a population estimate that is about 300 bears more than you've seen in the past, but that doesn't mean there's really more bears. It just means that we have a much more precise estimate now, because the previous one that we were using was very conservative, and everybody pretty much recognized that. Also want to note that 33% of the mortalities that we've had in 2021 have occurred outside the DMA, which is the demographic monitoring area that we use. That's the area that this population estimate comes from. So 33% of the mortalities that we've had with grizzly bears this year has occurred outside of that line. And that just kind of illustrates that bears are moving out, they're continuing to increase. And when they do move out, they tend to get in trouble because they're moving out of more remote areas into more of the front country. Next slide. So also what this slide shows is that this is the annual estimate for females with cubs from 2001 to 21. And what I just wanted to mention here was that the growth rate for the population has slowed recently, but it still is continuing to raise slightly. Next slide. So this is our occupied range map is updated every 2 years. So this is a range map that was finalized in 2020. This just shows the 2020 occupied range for grizzly bears. That blue line is the demographic monitoring area. And so basically what you're seeing is that within that DMA, we have pretty much full occupied range, and now bears are moving beyond that. Next slide. So one of the things that I just wanted to mention again was that the population estimate that was previously used, which people call CHOW-2, the science team has been working for several years on a better CHOW-2. I'd call it an improved CHOW-2, and basically that was what was used to estimate the population for 2021. And the bottom line there is that the previous CHOW-2 was very conservative, and the improved CHOW-2 for 2021 is just a much more precise estimate of the population. So the science team is also looking at integrated population models, and more than likely we will move into integrated population modeling for our population estimates. We're not there yet, but the science team is getting close. They're working on recommendations to potentially move to IPM models for population. Next slide. And this kind of shows what would occur if you did move into IPM for population estimate. The current one with the improved CHOW-2 is slightly over 1,000 bears, and this kind of really mirrors the CHOW-2 improved estimate. That's because the CHOW-2 actually goes into IPM. It's part of the modeling. And so it won't be a big change in numbers if we do move to that in the next year or two, but it will continue to just be more precise estimate. Next slide. So what the science team is basically doing for YES is they've incorporated the improved CHOW-2 into the estimates for 2021. That's done. They're looking at final improvements for an IPM model and testing that, seeing how that goes. And then this spring at our April meeting, the thought is that science team will report back to YES on whether or not we should move into the IPM model for population estimate. Okay. So that's kind of what's going on. Next slide. That's kind of what's going on at YES for 2021-22. I just wanted to respond to a couple of the questions that David gave the subcommittees. The first one is, what do you see as the most important things the subcommittees need to work on together in 2022? And I think that probably one of the things is to continue to share the I&E work and the products related to information and education. I think that is ongoing anyway, but we still need to concentrate on that, and probably could even do a better job with sharing products back and forth across subcommittees. And also, I think that sharing what works and what doesn't work related to conflict management with grizzly bears across subcommittees is good. I know I've been in the yes subcommittee for about 5 years now, maybe a little more, but I've heard a lot about what we're doing for conflict management within the yes subcommittee and that ecosystem, but not a whole lot from the other subcommittees unless it's a presentation at one of the IGBC meetings. Another question was, what else do you want the executive committee to know about your work? And that's kind of I'm not sure there's anything specific. There's just a lot going on. There's a lot of work that I just didn't mention. And, but you know, given 15 or 20 minutes, you're probably just not going to hear about it. I don't know how to better relay that information to the executive committee. I don't know what format maybe we could think about for doing that. Also, is there any specific direction that it would be helpful to get from the executive committee? And I think that my suggestion would be related to work plans. And I know we're going to talk about work plans later this week. But I think we need to do more coordination between the subcommittees and IGBC related to work plans. I know folks are thinking in that direction anyway. And I think one of the biggest things to think about is the timing of that coordination, where normally the subcommittees come to this meeting at this time of year and we tell you what our work plans are for 2022, but we really haven't visited with IGBC about what IGBC would want us to work on. And if our work plans we've already decided on for the next year fit in that more overall picture that IGBC is looking at, and is there anything specific that IGBC would want the subcommittee to work on? So I think maybe one of the things to think about is the timing of when that coordination between IGBC and the subcommittees occurs. Okay, so last slide. And this is for you. So if anybody has any questions, throw them out there. I really appreciate being able to talk early, and it's good to get together with you folks again, even if it's not in person.
Any questions for Jim?
David, the one thing I would like to just say on behalf of all of us, thanks, Jim, and thanks to all the folks you've been working with. I think you're demonstrating that, you know, as things change, we need to adapt and change and adjust and do what is relevant today. And you guys are demonstrating that. So just a huge thank you for the work you're doing and being willing to share that with everybody, because I think that's a great example of what we were all thinking of, how to advance and evolve and move forward. So really appreciate it.
Thank you. I think that, you know, no matter what the status grizzly bears are in, there's just always good work we can be doing. And so it's not like we need to just take time out and wait. There's always some good things we can do. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Matt.
Jim, thanks for a really thorough and great report. Kudos to you and the whole yes for all the good work. If you said this, I might have missed it, but the new site standards that you talked about, are you updating the conservation strategy to, you may have said this and I just missed it, so apologies, but is the plan to update the conservation strategy to reflect that, as well as some of the other good work you all have done?
It is right now, and I probably didn't make that clear enough. So the plan is what we're working on is changing the language in the conservation strategy that surrounds these developed sites. And so this spring, we hope to have that language final for review and voting by the YES subcommittee and incorporate that into the conservation strategy.
So you have I guess, is that coincides with your summer meeting or spring meeting of the YES?
Yeah, we have early April, I believe it is, we have a meeting where we hope to finalize all of this, and then basically it would be the one change that we're looking at right now for the conservation strategy.
Okay, and since we're talking about the conservation strategy, do you, and I'm not sure you can answer this at this point since this is relatively recent development, but the new tri-state MOA that a couple states have mentioned on this call, is the plan to update the conservation strategy to reflect that as well?
So I think you stumped me a little bit there.
Yeah, sorry, I know it's kind of real-time development, so.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the language in the tri-state MOU, the new one that's being considered, and I think we just have to look at that a little more to see if you would actually have to change the conservation strategy at all, make changes there. And if we would, then, we'd probably look at moving forward with that and seeing if YES wanted to do that. But first we had to wait to see what the language was for the tri-state MOU. We have to make sure that all 3 states sign it so that it is final. And so it was a little premature this fall, or even within the last month, to actually really get down to the nitty-gritty on whether or not a change is needed in the conservation strategy. But that's a really good question, and it is something for us to think about.
Yeah, well, I just think it's good to have it on your radar screen since you're updating the conservation strategy to reflect the site standards. Because there, as I recall, and it's been a while since I've looked at the conservation strategy, but it had some of the same information in it from the previous MOA. So, but glad it's on the radar screen. Again, thanks for a really good report. Thanks for all the good work the subcommittee's doing.
Great. Any other questions for Jim? Thanks so much, Jim. So again, that was a terrific subcommittee report, and we will hear from the other ecosystem subcommittees after our break a little later. On our agenda, we have got the report from me, the executive coordinator update, and the budget piece. And we also have a science report from Jennifer Fortenorius and we've got 35 minutes before our scheduled break. So I'm trying to think, I don't think I can do this in 10 minutes, Jennifer. So I wonder if maybe your scheduled start time was 11:05. Maybe we go into the science presentation, and then I can do the recap after the break. Does that make sense?
I'm flexible. Either way is fine with me.
Okay. And then I think you wanted to run your presentation. So are you able to share your screen?
I will try to start that now. Can you see the slideshow view?
We see the slide, yes.
Great, because now that I am presenting, I cannot see any of you. So please feel free to jump in and interrupt me if you have any questions, or enter them to the chat and I'll answer them later. One of the things that has come up frequently at the IGBC is sometimes the areas in between or outside the existing identified recovery zones. I want to give a brief overview of a pilot project that the service did this past summer and the preliminary results from it. The objectives of this project was to document the presence of grizzly bears in Southwest Montana outside of the current distributions in particular, documenting where the grizzly bears are coming from based on DNA evidence, and if there's any females with cubs. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the methods used and the preliminary results. This was our pilot year. The service, we had 1 full-time crew and 1 part-time crew. We also had assistance from Defenders of Wildlife and the Lolo National Forest, which each also had 2 part-time crews. So that greatly increased the number of sites that we were able to do. We were able to get out 140 sites on Forest Service land over the summer, from mid-May through the end of August. Each site was up for 3 to 4 weeks. We based those site locations on previous verified sightings and on recommendations of the bear biologists in the area. So these are the verified outliers from 2010 to 2019. You can see that we have a lot that occurred in what we call the Big Hole area. And then we have a few to the south of the NCDE distribution and to the north of the Bitterroot. And so those areas of Southwest Montana were our focus for this project. The hair corral setup we use is a protocol that's been being used in the Cabanac and Selkirk for many, many years. It's also been deployed on and off in other areas such as Yellowstone National Park with great success. The key is that the hair corrals use a lure with no bait. So there is no food reward for bears that come to these sites. And they have cameras at them so that we can detect, one, if we don't get hair off an individual, or if they're young that are so small that they don't leave hair when they go under the barbed wire. We use a standard protocol of distances from any high use human areas to avoid people interfering with the corrals. So these are the general overview of the site locations by season. We tried to have them, we started in mid-May. You can see we hit the Big Hole area pretty hard and early in the year, and up on the 9 Mile and the Lolo, their crew did that. We learned a lot this year, and we will be making some modifications for the coming field season if our budget allows. And one of those modifications would be to leave these sites up all summer long. We realized that this protocol works really well in areas where you have an established distribution, but given that bears may be just moving through these areas or have larger home ranges, and we're not sure what seasonal habitat is in all these areas, that we would increase our likelihood of picking up a bear if we had them out for the whole season and just reluring them every 3 to 4 weeks. We also had there's a lot of cattle allotments in the Big Hole, which makes it difficult to find areas outside of cattle allotments. And it's not that the corrals will hurt cattle, but the cattle can tend to trample and break down the barbed wire and destroy a hair corral site. So we're going to continue working closely with the Forest Service, and the Forest Service has been amazing to work with, all 3 forests for this project. We'll continue to work with them to identify some alternative sites to have them up longer next year. So this year, based on the cameras, we detected grizzly bears at 1 site. We detected black bears at 100 sites. We did have 52 sites with camera issues. Some of those were camera failures, but most of those were bears turning cameras or messing with them. And we will be working with the forest in the future to try to identify some other techniques to use to avoid having these camera issues. We did collect 805 hair samples. We sent 181 to the lab in Canada, the same lab that we all use in the lower 48 states for DNA analysis. The hair samples that were sent were the 1 corral site at which the grizzly bears were detected, and then any other sites where there were camera issues where we may not have identified all of the species present. You can see here that in the bottom left, how we have some very blonde phased black bears in this area. There's frequently you get to a site and you have a nice blonde tuft of hair and you get really excited, and then you look at the camera photos and there's only black bears. But it also makes you realize why we do get so many sightings that we are not able to verify, or black bears when we do see the pictures, in particular when we have very blonde cubs. So this is the locations where we had black bears, grizzly bears, and no detections. The green are the black bears, and the crosses represent we may have gotten a black bear, but then the camera also failed. And so we sent in those samples too, because we don't know what happened after the camera failed. In the middle, you can see the blue cross, and I'll zoom in on that. And that is where the grizzly bears were detected. So it's east and a little bit north of Sula, Montana, in the very lower part of the Bitterroot, kind of not quite to over the pass between the Bitterroot and the Big Hole. So there is actually 2 individual grizzly bears at this location. In the bottom left, you can see this bear, who's sometimes called Lingham Poulter, was collared from the NCDE from our conflict and made a foray down here to the site. The other picture is another individual grizzly bear that we do not know anything about yet, but hopefully we will soon based on DNA evidence. Those 2 individuals were at the corral for several minutes at the same time. So Cecily put this together and just thought it would be interesting to share. This is Lingham Poulter's movements this year once he got back south of I-90. Last year, he was relocated from south of I-90 to north of I-90 after a conflict. This year, he came back south, and you can see that most of his points are fairly clustered in the Flint Creek range. But the interesting part is that he does make this long foray, the pink dots, during June, during the breeding season. And that is when we detected him on the camera just northeast of Sula, Montana. So we've been reporting the preliminary results at the subcommittees and at some local meetings to outreach to the communities in Hamilton and Wisdom. We had a great feedback and great turnout at those local meetings. We're working on summarizing any verified sighting information from partners from 2021. So if you haven't shared that information yet, please do. We will continue using that information to identify areas for next year to expand potentially. We're already starting to schedule meetings with our Forest Service partners and the Fish, Wildlife and Parks and other partners, defenders, for improvements for next year. We hope to have the DNA results back before the spring meetings to see if we did have grizzly bears on any of those other sites, and information about the second grizzly bear on the site where we came out. So this project was a huge coordination, and I cannot thank all of our partners enough for all of their assistance, not only in helping identify sites, but being backup in case something went wrong. Thankfully, we never needed field assistance this year, but so many people offered their cell phone numbers in case there was assistance needed, and also just going into the field with us. We had several people from law enforcement, game wardens from Fish, Wildlife and Parks, or other biologists, and everybody was really excited, and that was great. As we continue coordination for next year, we have some needs. If we are going to leave all 140 sites out at one time, we will really need to increase the number of cameras that we have. We also may need to have another truck and personnel as we continue coordination calls to assess whether there are other people that are available from agencies to help put up these sites and relure them to allow this effort to continue. So that is the end of my slideshow, and I'm going to exit out so I can see all of you again and see if you have any questions.
Should we start the bidding, David? Should we open the bidding for some cameras in a truck? seems like it's too good of a opportunity to not take advantage of, not necessarily IGBC, but just the larger effort. Pretty cool stuff. So thanks for that report, Jennifer.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions for Jennifer, and this topic of bears outside recovery zones is one we may come back to in the course of this meeting. I want to take one moment to recognize a committee member who we missed at the beginning of the meeting. Michael Burwash from British Columbia. If you could turn your camera on and we can welcome you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, thanks, and sorry for joining late. I can give a really brief update, and I'm attending on behalf of the director, Jennifer Salaikas. I'm the Associate Director of Wildlife with the province of BC. And a really quick update is we're working on the Provincial Grizzly Bear Stewardship Framework, which has recently been drafted with First Nations, and we're timelining that for public review in the spring of 2022. That framework is focused on current grizzly bear science and Indigenous knowledge, and it supports the development of sub-regional grizzly bear stewardship plans, which many of the nations are very interested in. At the same time, we're also sharing a provincial commercial bear viewing strategy, which was also drafted with First Nations on the same timeline as the provincial stewardship framework. The bear viewing strategy is focused on considerations and next steps to manage this growing industry, mainly focused on the coast, but we do have 2 commercial operators in the interior and 1 in the Selkirk unit. And then a quick update on the Southwest Grizzly Bear Working Group, which includes the Stein and the North Cascades. They're working on First Nations-led recovery plans that are not yet finalized. There are plans for the Stein to move bears in this summer, and the North Cascades, the draft recovery plan is going to be reviewed by the province following public engagement. So that's just a quick update, and again, apologies for joining late. Nice to meet everybody.
Michael, you made my day by joining, as David had referenced earlier, that sad look, and because we do value the connection with our Canadian partners to the north, and if we really want to look at this thing holistically, it is critical to have you at the table and representation. So just I'll just say thanks for coming, and we'll always make space on the agenda for you.
Thanks, really appreciate it, and excited to be participating. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks, and I'll note, Michael, that you kept this trend going of, my goodness, there's quite a bit of activity on bear policy across this region, and I look forward to learning more about all 3 of the things that you just shared. That we've got issues in all those areas, and be interested to learn and connect. Let's see. So we're at 11:13. We're going to break at 11:35, and we'll stick to that break, I promise you. But I'm going to take the next 15 minutes or so and give you a report from my perspective. And let me just get my slides up and shared. So here we are in the meeting. So again, today we're taking a snapshot of the status quo with the subcommittee updates with the report from me. And then tomorrow we're looking at these programs that have been, some of which are long tenured, the bear resistant products testing program, and the information education outreach, where we've got some new ideas, and then the potential for this Bear Smart Communities program. And then Thursday, again, sort of more of a strategic planning effort. But again, just for me, reflecting on joining this group as the full-time staff member, I started June 7th, and we had the first summer meeting there right the very next week. And for me personally, I also had heart surgery. I had a heart valve replaced on May 4th. So thinking about this last 6 months in some ways has been a blur. I'm drinking out of my Mayo Clinic mug today because I'm grateful everything is working great. But you right out of the gate had some very big ideas in front of this group, and thinking about 40, almost 40 years with a very impressive track record with IGBC, but recognizing that what we use to achieve our past success may not be what's needed in the coming decade, and beginning to think about particularly geography, as the previous presentation sort of highlights for us, and also participation. Who can we work with to make progress on some of these difficult topics? So what I immediately, I'm in the, there we go, that's better. So for me, again, starting, many of you have heard me say crawl, walk, run. I have to learn. I moved from the Department of Interior National Park Service over to the Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service. So I'm very thankful to Region 1, where I'm based as a federal employee, working with reporting up to Chris Savage, and then Melanie Glossa, who's our executive member here on this subcommittee, but also in the Forest Service, making connections with their budget team and their grants and agreement team that have helped me figure out how to turn the knobs, if you will, on this IGBC partnership. Really working closely with the IGBC advisors, who you will hear from multiple times on this agenda. And also the budget committee, which is made up of executive members, and was an example from the previous year of executive members stepping up and taking on a discrete task to help move the ball forward. So I'm very grateful, and you'll hear more about that in the next presentation. And also I've been participating with the IEO subcommittee. I was able to join them as they thought about awards for this coming year. Also stood up a team to work on the website, which I'll talk about in a moment. And I was able to participate in all of the subcommittee meetings. North Cascades actually will be later today. And really will bring some observations. You already heard from Jim White and the Yellowstone subcommittee, but incredible diversity of ways of working in the different subcommittees. The problems are slightly different, but there is tremendous energy in all of them, and look forward to hearing those, presenting those reports to you this afternoon, and then thinking about the connection between this executive group and those subcommittees as we move through this meeting. So I'm going to do this before our break. What I want to do is give you a tour of this new website, which has ramifications for sort of our workflow and what we're what we're committed to as a group, and in sustaining and where we might be able to grow in the future. So I really want to thank the core team that I had: Kate Smith from the Fish and Wildlife Service, and Dylan Tabish and Lori Roberts from Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. But I also got lots of input from many others, and I'm appreciative to all of it, especially to Chris Smith at WMI. He's our partner, and he helped manage the contract to bring Snow Ghost Design out of Kalispell online to actually do the behind the scenes work, which was beyond all of us. So really grateful to them. So I'm going to stop the share. Right. New share. Where we go? Sorry, I haven't done this in a while. Oh, I see. Okay, so this is our new website. It's up at IGBC Online. And I'm going to walk through briefly some of the new features here. And let me start by saying, the approach of the website team was to retain the terrific material that's been accumulated. The first version of this website that I could find using the Internet Wayback Machine goes all the way back to 2007. So this group has been collecting and building material all the way since then. And we tried to bring all of it forward. And we're going to need help sort of as we get eyes on it to make sure that everything is current, that it's the best information. But the idea is that this is 30,000 foot information, that we've got our MOU and our charter and some of the high level information where, the purpose and membership come from our charter. But really, this is a group that is based, a group of bear managers, habitat managers, and the individual managers who are really the primary actors here. And so we want to connect to Fish and Wildlife Service right now, to the states, and to the other partners here. So that's what we're trying to do on that page. Moving over to, my view is hard because I'm also recording, I'm having a hard time seeing. So the again, we were thinking about two audiences with this new website. One, the internal sort of coordination between agencies, which really shows up on the committees and on the news and events, managing these meetings. But another primary audience is a more general public that IEO is trying to reach in many platforms, and this is just one. And again, so these three messages here are the universal messages that came from the IEO subcommittee as part of their past work. We're trying to really highlight those three messages. And then we're also trying to recognize all of the participating parties here have their own communication platforms, and we want to direct people, if anyone is interested or traveling to a particular place, to go directly to the source and highlight some of the terrific work from partners. But because we do get traffic and we are at that 30,000 foot, we have some particular topics for bear safety, and one that is, this group has taken action on in the past is on bear spray. But these are some of the others down the list here, and this is something that can grow. And again, we want it to be the highest level information and the most accurate and up-to-date information. Example here is food storage orders. You heard in Jim White's presentation from Yellowstone that there's some updates happening there. And what we've carried over from the previous site, this app, which I had this all ready to go, and it's but what the app has is sort of geographic based. You can identify an area, and it will take you to the food storage order itself, and also the link to that land manager. And so you heard from Jim that there's going to be some changes to food storage orders in the Yellowstone area. So this really requires that we get keep us up to date. We can easily update this. I know that there's been some issues with the PDF links, and we're working to fix that. But as things change, let us know and we can reflect them. And this is a useful tool for people that are moving through this region. And here's just an example of when you get down to the home units page. So that's the Be Bear Aware. And then we also have our programs. So the bear resistant products, bear education, bear science, and potentially bear smart communities. I will note that for bear products, bear resistant products, we've got the list here. We've got a way to report a product failure. And then if you're a company, a way to get your product tested. And then we're highlighting that this work is done in partnership with the Wildlife Management Institute and critically with the Grizzly and Wolf Discovery Center, where the testing actually occurs. On bear education, we're trying again to have the most up-to-date, the best examples of materials for use, by others, and to highlight partner work. And one idea going forward is, we've got this sort of biannual summit that has begun, and maybe that could be a place where some material gets hosted there. An idea in the future here is some targeted and specific webinars for, really putting, if there's a topic that we have knowledge on that we want to share, we can put together a well-organized webinar, and then that can live on the site. So then the final, or the next tab over here is our committees. And again, this doesn't change much from the previous website. We've got an orientation map, we've got the membership. And what I'll say about membership is, in the past, it was actually quite difficult to go in and keep up to date. You heard all the different membership changes that always occur at all levels of this enterprise. So what this is it's a Google sheet, and it updates every 5 minutes. So as soon as you tell me someone's changed, I put it in and it's immediately on the website. The one drawback to it is it's not viewable. If you are an employee of Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks right now, there's some firewall with Google. So if you can't see it, there's a PDF version that will be a little bit behind. But the idea is we want to showcase who's participating in this enterprise. You heard in Jim's presentation the public comment opportunity. So that's an active thing. The comments are due at the end of this month. So if you're considering commenting, go to the Yellowstone page here on our subcommittee, and that gives me a chance to highlight the way that the documents are now displayed. So it's sort of reverse chronological order, and these are the 3 documents that are out for public comment right now. And then this is the presentation that was given at the last YES meeting. If you want to get that, that's really good information if you're thinking about making a comment. And then I'll just note that when you press preview, you get sort of a very quick look at the document. And then when you press the link, it actually opens up a PDF viewer for you. We have lots of materials. Yellowstone in particular has a tremendous amount of material. So there's a way to sub-sort within that. And then also you can, if you're just looking back for agendas, you can sort it that way. That level of sort of sortability is going to be more prospective. It's hard to do it with all the material going back many years. So that will get better as time goes on. Each of the subcommittees has its past meeting materials. The prospective information is on the news page, which I'm going to get to in a second. So if there's an upcoming meeting, that's where that will be. But once the meeting has happened, the materials will post here. So we have meeting materials, and then each subcommittee also has policy management and research reports. So, and again, this is, we want to we don't want to put everything on the world up here, but the things that are relevant, have ongoing relevance and are continuing to be important, or some historic value. And then I'll note that for all of what I just said about documents, down here in the footer, there's a link to something called the document library. And everything that you just saw on that page can also be accessed here in more of a folder structure. So it's just another way to get at the materials. And tomorrow we're getting a report from the Board of Review, and those reports from the past are here in the document library as well. So then the final piece of this is the news page. And so I mentioned a number of things to mention here. First, again, this is the site. This is the place to look for information about upcoming events. Things that happened in the past will be on the subcommittee pages or on the executive committee page. We're going to try to save the dates. So once the committee sets dates in the future, even many months ahead, we'll try to highlight them here in the upper right. Then for when a meeting is coming up, about 1 week, 2 weeks before, we'll get the post up that has the agenda and the logistics for joining that meeting. And again, as with today's meeting, you have the agenda, you have the Zoom link, and then once that passes, the agenda goes in and gets archived on the page. So you can always go and it's always a good idea to sort of bookmark igbconline.org/news and check that from time to time. But another thing that we're going to be offering here is you can join our newsletter. There's a place to do it here. There's a place in the footer. There's a place on the homepage. It's all the same. But if you put your email in there, then when a meeting like this gets posted, you'll get an email saying that. So email can be tricky. I know when I signed up for this, it goes in my personal Gmail, it goes into something called promotions. And unless you go train it to say, don't put it in promotions, actually put it in my inbox, I wouldn't have seen that email. So look for it. It's something that we're offering, but always check the page and look for future events and sort of we'll try to keep that clear for folks. So that is the tour I had of the website. And let me stop this share now and go back to the slides, because I just want to really quickly show you the where we came from. So this was the 2007 version. I'm sorry that the Internet Wayback Machine didn't archive the picture there of our esteemed colleague, Chris Smith, who was the chair at the time. This was 2010. This was 2013, Scott Talbot from Wyoming. 2016, that's what it looked like up until last week. And then we get to the site that you just saw. So really thanks to everyone who participated in this, and thanks to all the folks who had this going for many years. I think it's going to be useful for this enterprise in just keeping organized, and there's a lot that we can work on going forward. Jackie.
Yeah, if I can jump in. And so, you know, I mentioned it when we started about David giving us his preview, and what a advancement, you know, over where we were even 10 years ago. Kudos to David and the team for doing all that. And we, you know, I want to put it out there. I know we got some input and feedback around some challenges of folks feeling like we hadn't had great notification of meetings or opportunities. And so the website, this is one avenue we're really trying to focus on to make sure that there is that awareness, there is that opportunity for the public to know what's going on and when we're engaging. And so hopefully all of you that are on here today will share it widely, let folks know about that. If there's any input, if you have suggestions of how we could do it even better than where we're at today, please let us know. The intent, the sincerity is with being open and transparent. We truly have nothing to hide. We're doing work on behalf of the American public, or North American public maybe. And so just help us help you. And they've done a tremendous job. Cannot say enough about what David's done just since he came on. But, you know, we're open to suggestions of how to do it better. So that's all I wanted to say, David.
Great. Any other questions? And again, yeah, this is, I'm sure we know for a fact that there's things we need to fix. So you just let us know, and it's definitely going to be a living document, and appreciate yeah, all the partnership that went into this already. Well, I see most cameras are off at this point, and that was really a good indication that it's time for a break, and we are scheduled for one. So what I'm going to suggest is that we take that break. We come back at noon as we were scheduled to do. Essentially, we're just swapping my budget brief for Jim's Yellowstone brief. So I'll start with that at noon, and then we'll hear the subcommittee reports, and that we're sort of on track here for the day as planned. Okay, so we'll be back at noon Mountain Time, 11 Pacific. Thanks all.
Thanks, David.
Okay, well, it's the top of the hour, so let's get started again. The major upcoming agenda items here are the reports from the subcommittee. We already heard from the Yellowstone Ecosystem Subcommittee, Jim White, this morning. He had a conflict during this time frame. So I'm going to now do the presentation that we missed from this morning, which was just a brief overview of the IGBC budget, the partnership budget portion of this budget. And let me get the screen, those slides up. So again, the IGBC budget, I've had help from the executive members that were part of this budget committee. We met monthly since I started in June. I think they were meeting prior to that. Very much appreciate their insights. And I've been working to basically understand, there had been an 18-month gap in the coordinator position. And so it's taken me some time to figure out the status of the different interagency agreements and what dollars are where in the federal system. But we're in very good shape with a long-standing partnership here. The federal agencies, both from the Department of Agriculture, Forest Service, and from the Department of the Interior, the BLM, Park Service, and Fish and Wildlife Service, have been contributing to IGBC, for more than 20 years, and at this level that you see on the screen now for almost 10 years. And so what that means is, and what we're approaching though, so I guess one threshold point to make is this is a drop in the bucket compared to what all of the partner agencies that are involved in IGBC contribute through their own core programs of work. So obviously, this is in addition, above and beyond to facilitate the coordination across agencies when you've got core agencies that are directly managing wildlife, directly managing habitat, directly doing science that contributes to this whole effort. So these are just the dollars that are IGBC dollars specifically, and that therefore can be directed by this group. And we've got, going forward, we're looking at in sort of the Forest Service is their contribution is I'm on board with the Forest Service. My salary is and expenses are covered there. And that's actually a larger contribution than it's been in the past from the Forest Service. So we're very grateful for that. And so that means that in terms of doing work in a program of work, in each year, we've got this 93,500 when you total the contributions from the DOI agencies. And for the Fish and Wildlife Service, that's 2 regions that are contributing there. And the way over the past several years that we've been doing work primarily, sometimes there's costs that go directly from the Forest Service to take care of any piece of work. But primarily, we are working in partnership, and we're very fortunate to have a challenge cost share agreement. It's the Forest Service that holds the agreement on behalf of the IGBC with the Wildlife Management Institute. And what we've done is we've renewed that agreement for this coming year. And there's a possibility that it could continue beyond that, but for sure, it's how we're going to do the work this coming year. And what this allows is 2 really important things that we, on the federal side, could not do. And one is, we don't have an authority for the award program that we run for information education outreach. This allows that to occur. And then the other piece is the bear resistant container program, where we're collecting fees from companies in exchange for then, giving them that certification that they have passed. And so the fees help sustain the program. Wildlife Management Institute is able to collect those fees, use those fees to offset the costs of running that program. So those are the 2 key elements to it. And when we look at the 93,500 for this coming year, we did a call for projects for the non-federal IEO grants, or for all the IEO grants. And the IEO subcommittee, and Lori Roberts will present on this tomorrow, have made their decisions about which projects to fund. And we can, in that conversation tomorrow, talk about what direction this committee might have for thinking about that in the future for the coming year. But the way we're doing it this year is the way it's been done. So we've got 42,000 that's going to be available for the non-federal parties, and then we're going to have about 14,000 that's separate, that is basically carryover that I've had from previous years that I'm going to be able to use to fund projects that the subcommittee has approved on Forest Service for the Forest Service. So it's Forest Service dollars that were contributed in the past that I'm going to apply to these projects in the coming year. We have support each year for the bear resistant container program. That's primarily a contractor, Patty Soka, that does some of the analytic work behind the protocols and some of the administrative work to support the program. And then we are adding an additional piece there. This website we think is going to improve people's access to the information about certification status, but we think that it could go even one step further, and that is automate things a bit. So right now, a company fills out a form and sends it in if they're requesting a test, and what we'd like to be able to do is have them input at the front end information and then have it be available and searchable to our public users. If you could search directly for your brand of cooler or anything that you're looking for there. So sort of a business flow database management to bring that forward a little bit. And we think that investment actually will reduce our administrative costs going forward and provide a little bit more value to the companies so that they can show pictures potentially of the products, have links that go directly to their sites, that sort of thing with the website. The next one is one that, again, you're going to be hearing about on the agenda tomorrow, but we've gone ahead and we've made an investment in contracting services for the Bear Smart communities. We have a team that stood up that's looking at criteria for Bear Smart communities, and they're now able to work with Andrea Morehouse, who's been brought on as a contractor to WMI, again, as part of this cost share agreement. And she is an expert based in Alberta, and you'll hear from her tomorrow on work she's done there on related programs, and then also how she's going to be working with our group, thinking about Bear Smart communities and its criteria. And then we also continue to get through this program general support, which is really access to Chris Smith at WMI, who it collects those administrative fees for the Bear Resistant Container Program and keeps these agreements going. So that's the WMI agreement for this coming year. And you recall from this past June, we were discussing, is this the best arrangement? So we've got this 93,500 that's been consistent, and sort of one of the goals I have at this meeting is to engage the executive committee on some commitments to do some work and some thinking and some evolution over the coming year. And so what I'm going to be looking for is volunteers for subgroups to take on some specific topics. And we already have this budget committee, and my suggestion would be that the budget committee continue to meet. And over the last 6 months, it's been a challenge just to figure out, okay, how does this work? At least for me, coming on new, how do we make this work? How do we annually collect the dollars? And how can we then execute on priority projects? But now we've got now that we have that basic question down, now we can get to some bigger questions. So, one is do we continue with this WMI cost share model, or do we look for something different? Again, we would have to satisfy the need to provide these awards to non-federal parties that are doing IEO work that's advancing our priorities. We have to figure out that bear resistant container program and its fee collection and handling. And then we'd have to think about, are we making commitments that we're going to need additional staff support to going forward? And then, even more fundamentally, and one that really is going to come back to this executive committee as well, is we've got this amount of federal funding. Are we using it to its highest need? I mean, are we getting the biggest bang for the buck here with the way that we've been doing it in the past? And you could do it, and you could decide to do different things. And I think it's something that is important. Do you want to do a big project one year, invest something in some big science piece or some big social science piece, or do you want to commit to something that's sustained and goes for a long period? And then finally, and I think, sort of most interesting from a lot of the folks I've talked to is, can we grow this pie a little bit? There's a tremendous interest in a lot of these topics. And at this committee, you're able to make priorities, set priorities and say this is important. And maybe we can attract partners to work with us in some of this work. So those are my questions for the budget committee in the coming year. And look forward to that. And then you heard from Jim White already, and we're about to shift into the subcommittee reports. And then you're going to get reports from programs tomorrow. But again, as we think about what is the work that you might want to take on, I've been increasingly thinking about these 4 buckets. Habitat management obviously is core function for many of our agencies. And for subcommittees, you already heard the Yellowstone report this morning. Those conservation strategies obviously are securing habitat. That's a core function here of individual agencies and also subcommittees. And then another core function within our agencies were all science-based. And again, from the Yellowstone report, you heard quite a bit on evolving science, improving science, and ways of collecting, managing, reporting, understanding information. And for both of these, this question that was raised in June and that this group started to tackle in June was both the question of geography and sort of scale and participation. Do we have are we doing work that connects between places, and do we have everyone that we might need involved to make progress on something? So there's an open question for both habitat and science. And then I think we're already moving in that direction with information education outreach, and you'll hear Lori's presentation tomorrow, but each subcommittee, each local unit is doing work at their scale, but we're starting to see, hey, that we can provide value at this larger regional scale by amplifying messages, by producing the best possible information, in the clearest way, and by understanding and measuring, is it getting to where it needs to go, and is it having the effect that we hope that it's going to have. And then the 4th bucket, is one that this committee, when Matt Hogan was chair, he sent a letter to each of the subcommittees and asked them to take on this question of conflict management and prevention. And again, I'm just listening to different groups and how we're all touching different parts of this challenge. But I see, there's a question around data. If we're going to reduce conflict, we need to be able to know what conflicts are occurring, what the categories are. Is there some work at this level in terms of coordination of using common nomenclature and common information? And then you're going to hear about Bear Smart communities. We already heard about 399 and Jackson. Clearly, there's a need for work there, and maybe not work that's traditionally IGBC, wildlife, or habitat managers, but really it's communities that are on the front lines, and how can we support them and give them tools? Similarly, you heard in the Yellowstone report out backcountry recreation, food storage orders, infrastructure, a whole host of issues related to that, and ongoing work there. You also heard in Yellowstone the need to address this question of livestock and working with landowners and producers. And that, if this group is going to take on that question, we're going to need to work with additional parties on the landscape. And then finally, just in this conflict list, have to mention transportation. And again, that's a whole different group of parties and potential opportunities with infrastructure and other things coming down the pike. So I'm just putting this out there now as you listen to the subcommittee reports, because they're all doing work in all of these areas. And then the question that's going to come back to this committee is, encouraging the you heard, sort of Jim stole the thunder a little bit this morning, but he asked, what, you tell us what you're looking for. And, I think that this interplay and connection is an important part of what I've been asked to look at, and trying to put this into some context for the region as a whole, and sustain the work that's happening at the local level. So with that, I'm going to stop and see if there's questions. We are a high energy group today. All right, well, with that, I guess it's time to switch over to subcommittee reports. So the next on the list, Kristen Bale, are you on the line? So North Cascades, your fall meeting is actually later this afternoon, but maybe you can share with us what you know right now.
Yes, good morning, or maybe for some of you, afternoon, everyone. I'm Kristen Bale. I am the forest supervisor for the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest, and currently serving as the chair for the North Cascades Ecosystem Subcommittee. And so I wanted to share with you a few key personnel changes. I think I'm continuing the trend of lots of transition happening. We are welcoming a new park superintendent for the North Cascades National Park. Don Stryker is coming on board, so looking forward to working with him on all sorts of issues, including grizzly management. With the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Tom McDowell is joining our group. He is taking over for Jeff Kripke. There's been some change in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staffing, a little bit of reorganization. So looking forward to working with Tom. And mixed emotions on this last one. Our long-term wildlife biologist on our Methow Valley Ranger District for the Forest Service, John Rohr, is retiring this month. John has been a really key player in the work that the technical team has been doing for the North Cascades ecosystem. Really appreciate all the work that he's done for grizzly, and as well as carnivores, and for wildlife on the Methow Valley Ranger District. So if you know or work with John, please send him your best wishes for his retirement. He will definitely be missed. So we have had our summer subcommittee meeting that was held June 1st. And as David told you all, we are having our fall subcommittee meeting, kind of going into winter, this afternoon, December 7th. So really looking forward to getting up to speed on the work that we've been doing, and having important conversations as we move forward to continue our work together. A big part of what happened this year in the North Cascades Ecosystem Recovery Zone is we did have experience with wildland fire. There were two larger type 1 incidents that happened this summer, Cub Creek 2 and Cedar Creek fires, and they impacted a total of 125,000 acres of land within the recovery zone. The fires were located on the Methow Valley Ranger District of the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest. There was, quite a bit of impact from these fires. There was a high amount of stand replacing fire, but also a matrix where there were lower severity burn areas. So the forest will be soon starting work on post-fire recovery, looking at our options for post-fire recovery in that area. And that also impacted an ongoing NEPA project called the Twist Restoration Project that was looking to address forest resiliency and fuels reduction work, as well as other important restoration work in that area. So we'll be having to look at how that fire impacted that project and what our plans are for moving forward. This is just another piece of fire impacting the landscapes on the national forests that are within the North Cascades Ecosystem Recovery Zone. There's been a lot of fire footprint, and that unfortunately that trend is continuing. So we will be looking for trying to work with our partners. We have a very active collaborative, work with our partners to proactively treat and make more resilient the remaining landscapes outside of the wilderness, so that they can provide all sorts of habitat benefits, more so than we can under uncontrolled wildland fire. We are going to be this afternoon, the subcommittee will be reviewing its progress on our work towards our 5-year plan. And I'll just briefly go over the 3 main goals that we have for our subcommittee. The first is to establish and implement clear direction for recovery. And the next is to maintain or enhance habitat conditions. And the third is to document presence of bears. So regarding goal 1, establishing and implementing clear direction for recovery, the main focus of that goal has been tied to the reintroduction environmental impact statement that was initiated and then terminated by Secretary Bernhardt. And based on some of the interest that I'm getting for making comments in this afternoon's meeting, I think some folks are interested in asking the administration to take another look at whether they want to reinitiate that work, but I have not heard that is any firm decision or commitment at this time. But just interesting that folks are expressing interest in renewing that conversation. On goal number 2, maintaining or enhancing habitat conditions. A big part of the work that the technical team did was to review the available science regarding our high-use non-motorized trails and how they are evaluated when calculating core area in a bear management unit. We have the approach of no net loss in core areas, and one area of need that's been identified is just the rapidly increasing amount of recreation use, and quite a number of high-use trails that have been and are likely to be in grizzly habitat. And the tech team really wanted to get a good fresh understanding of the issue and where we were. And they have again found that yes, high-use non-motorized trails can, of course, cause impacts to not only grizzly, but other wildlife. And that we do need to look to make a change to our current definition of a high-use non-motorized trail and how we buffer that. So our tech team is going to continue its work on that, continuing to look at research results and buffered instances, and provide information to the subcommittee as to what we should do with that refreshed information. Another big key area of work has been utilizing the Great American Outdoor Act funding to purchase animal resistant dumpsters and trash receptacles. And now we have all of our campground dumpsters animal resistant. We have been continuing to have workshops on living and recreating in bear country. Our partners with Defenders of Wildlife have been key to putting on that workshop. And we are continuing to put in food storage facilities in front and back country throughout the areas where bears may occur. And this is a really key part of one of our other action items, which is food storage orders, because we really want to get the infrastructure in place to have the food storage facilities available to folks, so that when an order is implemented and contemplated, we can say that we've done our part to make it happen and provide resources to our recreating public, because we do get folks from literally all over the country, but a lot from the west side of the state, who may or may not be very prepared to be recreating in bear country. So trying to create a win-win partnership by providing the means as well as the the compliance environment for that. And of course, signage continues. We're looking at consistent signage throughout the area, and again, a lot of the work has had to be focused on both fire suppression response and fire recovery. So that will likely continue a bit into fiscal year 2022, as that does create a lot of workload and attention on recovering those impacted landscapes. And our third goal, documenting presence, we continue to follow up on all reports, and we have trail cameras deployed. We have not had any verified sightings in 2021 to report. So that situation has been the case for a number of years now. In terms of our communications to the executive committee, the continued environment that we are operating in, with a recovery zone, but not really having much opportunity for bears to be coming down to us from British Columbia due to geophysical barriers. That it's likely the case that we won't get much influx from there, although our British Columbia partners are reporting that some reintroduction efforts are getting closer to the border, but bears are still going to have to travel a ways. And so continuing to understand the fate and planning for the reintroduction EIS will be important for us to continue to have a lot of coordination and awareness about. And then, of course, just understanding how our ecosystem can best play in the overall recovery of the grizzly bear, and if there is interest and ability in having a refresh of the recovery plan. I think there's a lot of good work that can be done to really get a better sense of where and what part of the ecosystem are the best places to focus that effort, because it's a very large area that currently has on its southern part some very scattered pockets of really suitable habitat, and really the park, the Pasayten Wilderness, and a few other areas are probably where we want to be focusing our efforts. So look forward to continuing to interact with the committee during the meetings this week, and also looking forward to our subcommittee this afternoon. And with that, I will send it back to you, David, and answer any questions that folks might have.
Thanks, Kristen. That's a lot of Zoom today for North Cascades. Any questions for Kristen? Okay, well then, next up on the agenda, I'll recognize Sandy Fisher. Sandy's the vice chair right now for the Bitterroot Ecosystem Subcommittee. And Sandy, you want me to put the slides up, right?
Yes, please. That'd be great.
All right, here we go.
Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everyone. JJ Tier, who's the chair for the Bitterroot, wasn't able to make it today. He's tackling some items related to the recently detected CWD and mule deer here in Idaho. So I'm subbing in for him and just presenting on the PowerPoint he pulled together. So please bear with me a little bit, no pun intended. So first off, just as a bit of background on the Bitterroot, we have representation from the surrounding national forests to the ecosystem, BLM, Fish and Wildlife Service from Idaho and Montana, Idaho Fish and Game, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and then several county commissioners and the Nez Perce tribe. We did have 2 meetings this year, both of which were virtual. Next slide, please. We have an active science committee, science subcommittee spearheaded by Mike Pruss with the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest. The science subcommittee also met a few times this year and developed some short-term products and actions, really around some survey and modeling and database work, and then some I&E efforts really around a lot focused on food storage. They also developed some potential long-term products and actions around habitat modeling and monitoring and mapping, as well as some a human dimensions survey effort, similar to the one that was completed in Montana a couple years back. Next slide, please. The Education and Outreach Subcommittee is led by Jen Bruns with the Idaho Fish and Game. This group's focus this year was on bear smart communities and bear aware campaigns focused on recreational users. They also monitored 4 grants this year that were received for the education and outreach work in 2021. Next slide, please. Of note in the Bitterroot ecosystem this year was a project led by the Wind River Bear Institute, along with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, to assess bear-wise infrastructure and public outreach on the Bitterroot National Forest. The 2 primary elements of that work were education and assistance in the Bitterroot, using trained Karelian bear dogs to conduct community outreach in order to kind of prepare the public for grizzly bear expansion through the Bitterroot Valley. The second element of the work looked at mapping human bear conflict hotspots to identify priority neighborhoods where there's the highest need for conflict mitigation. Next slide, please. Additionally, there is also a University of Idaho graduate project that's ongoing. Master student Katie Shaw is exploring human dimensions work in the Bitterroot. And so during the summer of 2021, she conducted interviews and focus group meetings to assess community opinions toward grizzly bears and their management, as well as trying to assess the level of trust that residents in the Bitterroot have around grizzly bear management. From the preliminary results that she presented out on at our last meeting in the spring, the results basically suggest some of the drivers cause for concern were personal safety, concerns around impacts to other wildlife populations, economic drivers, and then just ESA baggage, as it was referred to. And so those final study results are going to be presented out to us at our next meeting next spring. Next slide, please. And then finally, the Southwest Montana DNA Project. This is a cooperative project between the Fish and Wildlife Service, Lolo Forest, and Defenders of Wildlife. They used cameras to document presence of bears in Southwest Montana. 2021 results only detected a grizzly bear at 1 site. There are some hair samples that were collected and submitted for DNA analysis, and so we're awaiting results on that. Next slide, please. As far as updates from each agency, I won't go through every bullet, but some highlights for the Salmon Chalice National Forest. There was a verified grizzly bear identified for the first time on the forest just south of Lemhi Pass that was picked up by a hunter's game camera. On the Nez Perce Clearwater Forest, they were deep into forest plan revision work this year, and also kept busy with an active fire season in the front country. But they did do a lot of education work with the firefighters, and they also did a lot of proactive work with outfitters and guides in the community this year on bear awareness. Next slide, please. On the Lolo and Bitterroot National Forests, they kept busy with some infrastructure work for bear awareness and conservation, like bear-resistant trash bins and signage. Additionally, the Lolo National Forest is jumping into the early stage of their forest plan revision work. So we'll be getting deep into that here pretty soon. For Fish and Wildlife Service, the only update I have is just more of an FYI for awareness. On November 5th, Alliance for the Wild Rockies and Native Ecosystems Council filed suit to challenge our rulemakings in the 2001, our rulemaking in 2000 and 2001 to reintroduce grizzlies to the Bitterroot ecosystem. The complaint states APA and NEPA claims. So at this point, not much more obviously we can say. You know, I think everyone is just going to be tracking this complaint as it works through the courts. Next slide, please. And then last but not least, the state agency activities for 2021 in Montana. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks spent a fair amount of time responding to reports of grizzly activity, as well as on placement of bear-resistant containers and reducing attractants. They also worked closely with the Five Valleys Wildlife Passage Working Group and Montana Department of Transportation on issues related to wildlife passage and collision. And then in Idaho, in the Clearwater region, they too dealt with an extreme fire season. There were no verified sightings of grizzly bears detected in 2021 in the Clearwater region, but they have some current projects up and running with the use of camera sites that's going to allow for some continued monitoring and potential detection in the future. The region also continued with their bear aware campaigns, just like so many of the other agencies and groups operating in the Bitterroot ecosystem. So that's it for the Bitterroot, a busy year for us, but happy to try to answer any questions anyone might have.
Questions for Sandy and the Bitterroot? Okay, next up.
Sorry, David, I couldn't get off mute fast enough. Hey, Sandy, good to see you. The work the graduate student is doing, you said you're going to get the committee's going to get a presentation on that in the, is it your spring or summer meeting?
The spring meeting is the plan.
Okay, can others join that? I'd be kind of curious to hear what they found out.
Yeah, I think we can open that up. I'll connect with JJ on that. And,
you charge like $100 a ticket or something, maybe. So.
At least, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Good deal.
Okay. Any other questions for Sandy? Then let's see. Is Ben Conardon from the Selkirk Cabinet Yak? Okay, Ben, and you've got your slides ready to go. Are you able to share it?
We will try that.
Okay, take it away.
How is that?
We can see it.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you, folks. My name is Ben Conard. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm the Deputy Office Supervisor for the Montana Ecological Services Office. Currently serving as chair for the Selkirk and Cabinet Yak Grizzly Bear Subcommittee. If some of you are new or did not know, this subcommittee covers two ecosystems. Selkirk and Cabinet Yak are unique, but closely proximated. And so we have always worked as one subcommittee covering both ecosystems. Had a lot of comings and goings on the subcommittee.
and can't possibly cover them all, but I will touch on a few. I want to thank everyone who is a member and their staff for contributing to the report, especially Justin Teisberg of our office and Wayne Kaysworm for doing a lot of legwork for me in preparation. And then David Diamond for engaging with our subcommittee and helping us to communicate not only our contact lists, but our information and making the website migration. So we've had some shakeup in the leadership of the subcommittee. I served 2 years as vice chair, and now I'm in my first year as chair. Jeannie Higgins, forest supervisor from the Idaho Panhandle, was our vice chair. She retired last winter, and so we saw a new vice chair moving into this year. With some gentle cajoling, we were able to recruit Steve Pazangara from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so he is going to finish a year term, the rest of the year term of the vice chair, and he will assume the chairmanship next winter at our late fall, early winter meeting. So right before the turn of the year. My report's gonna be broken into 2 parts. I'll first report on the Cabinet Yaak ecosystem and then the Selkirk ecosystem. Our report is structured in a way that speaks to our work plan, the outline structure that steps through our goals, objectives, and whatnot. And then at the end, we'll address the 3 questions posed by the IGBC to the subcommittee. Okay, so our first goal for the Cabinet Yaak is increased grizzly bear population size and distribution. We have an ongoing augmentation program. However, in 2021, no candidate bears were found in the NCDE to move. But should be noted that 22 bears have been added since this program started in 1990, 14 females and 8 males. This has resulted in some significant improvements to the population. We've documented that at least 4 of those augmentation bears are known to have produced offspring, and this has resulted in 14 first generation offspring, 22 second generation offspring, and 4 third generation offspring to the Cabinet Mountains. So we've definitely seen that the augmentation program has probably saved the Cabinet Yaak population and turned it around in some ways. Second objective under increasing the population distribution is to limit human-caused mortality. This is done through a variety of actions that you're all familiar with, including IE and preventive measures. I can't possibly give due credit to all the work that has been done and is being done. And so our report will detail the specific actions that have taken place, the monies that have been exchanged, the support, and the collaboration. So please refer to our report when we upload it to the website. In 2021, we didn't document any human-caused mortality in the Cabinet Yaaks, so it's been a great year. We're being very close to denning season, so we hope this holds. And then our third objective under the population size and distribution is to document population growth and distribution. So this year we received the results for the 2020 rub tree and hare corral surveys and the DNA work. It's asterisks because that was a greatly curtailed year due to the COVID pandemic. However, the folks still did get out and get some work done. That effort a year ago resulted in 41 unique individuals being identified, 14 female and 27 male. For comparison purposes, we identified 50 unique individuals in 2019. The crews captured and collared 5 additional bears in the Cabinet Yaak. We're seeing just slightly over a 1% population growth rate. That's the long-term average. And in terms of distribution, 13 of our 22 BMUs are occupied with females with young. Our next goal is about connectivity and linkage. Some key accomplishments last year, or this bear year, that was a 27,000 acre conservation easement that Stimson Lumber Company stepped into. and it was approved by Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. This is southeast of Libby. So that's perpetual protection for working forests, and just a great stroke for providing, continuous habitat across that ecosystem and potentially some linkage areas. Additional land assessments are still underway, so that's to be determined. And then the linkage zone information that has come out over the years has been used mostly by the Forest Service in land use planning. This year, they use that information to close some motorized trails in close proximity to Highway 2 to allow more secure approach areas and possible crossing of Highway 2. And then, of course, you've seen a lot of the work that's being done just in general bear monitoring, movement, DNA work inside and outside of the recovery zones. And our third goal is to apply the results of research to land management. Mostly the Kootenai tribe of Idaho continues to look at a report out of the University of Montana about the Pacific Northwest Trail. There's a lot of concern over routing recreationists who are unfamiliar with grizzly bears through some really prime grizzly bear habitat and what that might result in. Some folks would like that trail moved. It's a congressionally designated trail, so we take an act of Congress and quite a bit of work. But just know that that's out there as an issue. And then, of course, the Forest Service continued to use habitat quality maps in their planning. They used the quality of the maps to decide on some reroutes and some designation of motorized versus non-motorized trail on their Elk Lake project, for example. They were able to direct motorized routes to less high quality habitat and have non-motorized routes in the higher quality habitat. And then our fourth goal, which with the pandemic, we haven't really been able to do much with, and this is the second year we don't have any explicit accomplishments with getting together with the NCDE and starting to crosstalk some of our work, talk about the intervening bears between the ecosystems. It should be noted that there's a lot of common members on both the NCDE and Selkirk, but we haven't done anything overt this year. Now, moving on to the Selkirk ecosystem, we have the same type of the structure in terms of our work plan and goals. So once again, I&E was affected by the pandemic, but there were a lot of innovations this year. More and more folks moved to virtual sessions and virtual tools. All the typical things you hear about, bear rangers, safety courses, some limited fair booths, all that still occurred this year. So it was good to see some loosening and some contact with public. Again, that's all going to be detailed in the report, and I encourage you to look there for due credit to all the people and entities who have contributed to that. Another piece of work that went further this year, the Mount Hall waste transfer site in Boundary County, that was acquired and started to be set up last year. This year, I think they moved in some bear-proof dumpsters and are getting that fully operational. And then luckily, in the Selkirk ecosystem as well, we've documented no human-caused mortality. Getting back to some of the metrics that we use, again, rub trees, hair corrals, and all were deployed in 2021. Again, a year-old DNA results came rolling in from 2020, the year of the height of the pandemic. It was scaled back, but 36 unique individuals were identified, 15 female, 21 male. For comparison purposes, there were 44 unique individuals identified in 2019. The teams captured 4 additional bears in the Selkirks this year. And of particular note, the first research adult female in Washington. I think they also caught a subadult male. Check on that. The Selkirk population is experiencing slightly more than 1% rate of increase, long-term average. And then in terms of distribution, 8 of 10 BMUs occupied by females with young. One of our goals unique to the Selkirk, because the recovery zone actually stretches into Canada, it's not just a happenstance, it's actually set up this way, is to increase transboundary cooperation. Many of our partners have offered up financial assistance and cameras to implement a hair snagging program north of the border, which complements the work going on south of the border. So this was the second year of that effort. The population estimate for both sides of the border is expected in 2022. And then the Kootenai Tribe of Idaho notes that they've been working with their sister tribes in Canada on a variety of issues, just coordination, information exchange, the different tools they use. So getting to the three questions from the IGBC, the first question was, what do we see as the most important work for our subcommittee? We think that that will be limiting human-caused mortality, working through sanitation, I&E, and all of that to get ahead of the expanding grizzly bear populations. They are starting to turn up, even in these small ecosystems, they're starting to turn up outside of these small ecosystems. We want to be ahead of that. That is probably the most effective measure we can take to increase and recover the population. A lot of the access and the traditional challenges and questions that we had, for the most part, been taken care of or very close to meeting our objectives. So if we can just keep bears alive, reproducing, that's going to be our best bet. Second question was, what do we want the executive committee to know about our work? And we thought about that, and of course, we have excellent collaboration with partners like you all do. We want to note that we have two very engaged tribes on our subcommittee. They're members of the subcommittee. And we also want to point out that they've repeatedly asked how the tribes might be represented at the IGBC executive level. Something to consider. I know some of the other subcommittees have tribal representation, but the Kootenai Tribe of Idaho and the Kalispel Tribe of Indians have excellent fish and wildlife departments, and they do a lot of groundwork. So they're not just at the table as stakeholders, interested parties, and sovereigns. They're out there doing great work in the community and in the field, helping collect data and whatnot. Then your third question was, is there any specific direction that would be helpful to get from the executive committee? And I would suggest that it'd be good to get some direction or consistency on how and to what extent we can start facilitating bears outside of recovery zones, especially in between recovery zones. We're starting to see this stepping stone type of expansion, and a lot of the work that we do does not necessarily apply to the intervening areas. So how can we cooperatively approach this challenge? And, start to work in those areas, start to do things that aren't necessarily heavy-handed, but maybe start grassroots. Anything that the executive committee can do to facilitate that, create consistency, or provide direction would be helpful. With that, I'll take any questions.
Hey, Ben, this is Hugh Morrison with Fish and Wildlife Service. Thank you for that presentation. That's great. I have a question for you. You mentioned in both those ecoregions, the monitoring had shown a smaller number of individuals over the prior year. Is that a cause for concern, or is this just related to the sampling process?
Yeah, it's just a relation of effort. Because of COVID, the efforts were scaled back.
Okay. And then in regards to the national trail that is a concern for some, are folks already using that trail? And if so, are we seeing conflicts increasing already?
I'm not aware of any conflicts on the trail. It's absolutely being used. You can go on YouTube and see folks document their adventures. There's a website. It's out there. The fear is it's going to become more and more popular. It's going to draw folks from around the world, in the nation, and then direct them right deep into grizzly bear habitat where they might not have the I&E signs like you find in a park or whatnot. And so that's the concern, is looking forward. Who are we directing, and would there be a better route? There's some suggestions for a different route. The challenge is it's
Thank you. Yeah, I can understand why that would be cause for concern. So appreciate that.
So real quick, I want a couple other comings and goings. Longtime forest wildlife biologist Mike Borshevitz is retiring. You may not have heard of Mike. He's a very humble individual, but he did long work, hard work, working behind the scenes from the Colville National Forest. So he's leaving. And then on our I&E committee, Kim Annis from Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks is stepping back, and Christy Johnson Hughes from the Fish and Wildlife Services Idaho office is going to be stepping in to the I&E subcommittee and taking up a greater role there. Sorry for that oversight.
Hey, Ben, thanks for the good report. Lots of, it seems like on every one of these committee reports, we've heard about a lot of institutional knowledge walking out the door. So a lot of big shoes to fill. A follow-up question from Hugh's question about the trail. So is the concern both on the side of people in conflicts with bears because they're uninformed or uneducated about being in grizzly bear country or don't know where they're there, or also impacts on bear habitat with more and more people going through the habitat? Is it both, or is it one predominantly or the other?
Probably less extent habitat. It's a foot trail. It's non-motorized, and a lot of it is along. It's actually along some roads. It's not all foot trail, but the most remote parts are your standard foot trail you find anywhere. I think it's the main concern is that it's marketed. It's widely marketed. It's an adventure trail, and that it's going to be directing folks from all over the place who are not familiar with grizzly bears into. It traverses some really prime habitat as it traverses Idaho and Montana. In hindsight, it probably was the best place, but you know how these things work.
Yeah.
There's some alternatives to create some win-win solutions, maybe direct some of that traffic to touch base in some of the communities there. Economic folks need to be resupplied and whatnot. So there's some alternatives that could be crafted that would create a win-win.
Well, with some of the infrastructure funding and such, maybe now would be a good time to make a run at that of rerouting it. Second question on the tribal participation. You said the two tribes on the subcommittee have expressed an interest. Do they have any thoughts? Because I know we've struggled with how would you invite tribal participation on the executive committee, and I'm not sure if they have any ideas about how you would do that.
They recognize the challenge. I mean, how can you possibly represent? I don't even know how many sovereign entities on the executive subcommittee. They have recognized that there are the right terms, coalitions, or some organizations, intertribal coalitions. Maybe that would be a method. They have offered that up. We could think about that.
Got it. Thanks, Ben.
Do that.
David, was that it for subcommittees?
No, we have one more subcommittee. And just before I switch it over, is there any more questions for Ben in the Selkirk and Cabinet Yaak? Okay, then it's time to recognize Bill Avey and the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem. Bill.
All right, thank you very much. So our, just a refresher for folks, the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem subcommittee is made up of representation from Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, USDOI, BLM, Montana Department of Transportation, the Blackfeet Nation, the CSKT Nation, U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Wildlife Services, Montana Livestock Board, as well as Alberta and British Columbia. We had our meeting last Wednesday, December 1st, our winter meeting. Unfortunately, the Blackfeet Nation representative could not be there due to a large fire on the Blackfeet Reservation that day, threatening the town of Browning, nor did we have a representation through the meeting from our Canadian partners either. Couple of things real quickly. want to talk about what our science team is working on. Current projects right now are connectivity and range expansion, a better integrated population model, detection of parturition events and denning chronology from collar activity data, management response to residential developed site conflicts, drivers of human attitudes in Montana. I believe you saw the Bitterroot subcommittee mention that as well. Use of grain bins by bears, efficacy of guard dogs, the US2 connectivity study, citizen science, huckleberry monitoring, and a DNA-based approach of density changes in Glacier National Park. Some topics during their meeting, which was the end of November, for updated information, is some additional work related to early spring habitat use, fire and forest treatment on habitat use, work on a best grid cell size and data parameters for estimating population distribution, testing of low intensity camera and hair snag sampling, and increased reporting of sightings, particularly in the wilderness bear management units. We currently have an estimated population, I believe, of around 1,100 bears in the NCDE. For this year, our total reported and unreported mortality for 2021 is 42 bears. That's 18 females and 25 males. The leading causes inside the demographic monitoring area are automobile and agency removal for livestock, followed just a little bit by apparent, I would say, being investigated, possible malicious activity as well. Our leading causes and all those fatalities within the demographic monitoring area, which for the NCDE is the primary conservation area or zone 1, are really on the external pieces of that, right, on the fringes when you looked at the map. The leading causes outside that demographic monitoring area are really agency removal for livestock conflict and automobile, and really the primary amount of fatalities there were in zone 3 and essentially east of the Rocky Mountain front out on the prairie. For both male and female bears, we are below our total reported and unreported mortality thresholds. That's 23 for females and 28 for males, but we are a little bit up this year when you looked at that. And then I want to touch on the sub-report or the report from from Jennifer Fortin Norris's DNA work in Southwest Montana, because the bear that she spoke to, Lincoln Polder, I do not know where the nickname came from or what that means. But the other side of that story, if you will, is that bear was relocated to the NCDE and then it came back, and she spoke to that to Southwest Montana. But the really interesting thing with that is the amount of times that bear attempted to cross I-90. And that bear was tracked and collared and, truly multiple of times that bear before it finally made it across I-90. And really it shows in a very graphic example, I think, the problem of these large transportation corridors and connectivity and the barriers they are to connectivity. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a little bit. Activity synopsis for us, I really want to commend all the grizzly bear managers. They're just truly doing an outstanding job across the NCDE, and particularly with I&E and all of our partners with I&E. And as Ben just mentioned in his subcommittee report, again, working through the pandemic, finding new ways to connect with folks. Really a big commendation to our grizzly bear managers and our I&E committee on the subcommittee. I'm going to give you, I've been on the subcommittee now as forest supervisor for about 10 years. And I would say one of the things I noticed when I listened to the bear managers report this year that was a little different than what we've seen in our previous winter meetings is, I would say, for the last 5 years, most of our activity upticks, if you will, and concerns about human bear conflicts have been really to the east of the primary conservation area, east of the Rocky Mountain front, as those bear populations have moved into the prairies and into areas that they previously were not recently in. in large numbers. This year, it was really fascinating listening to the bear managers report out in the amount of uptick in activities in the Flathead, but also the Sealy and Missoula areas. And that's really a function certainly of increased bear numbers, but it's also a function of the increased population that's come into the state and settled in that area. And I would point out Glacier National Park this year saw record visitation, though they did not have conflict issues. Their record visitation was about 3 million people. So that, you know, when you look at that area, particularly that area between the NCDE and Cabinet Selkirks and the amount of population in there and the impact as Missoula grows north, you know, I think it's just food for thought as we look. We're seeing that nexus of two growing population, bears and people, if you will. Notable issues from those reports, really, unfortunately, the tragic Ovando fatality, and I know that'll be discussed a little bit more. I think one of the things that, on a positive note, one of the things that I took away from that has been the city of Whitefish working with the Republic Trash Company to bear-proof all trash containers in Whitefish. And I think that was an incredibly positive move. And then the other piece that I think is quite notable is we had our first confirmed grizzly bear sighting in the Missouri River Breaks. So that gives you a scale of how far that population is moving out in the prairies. I touched a little bit on the human population growth in the Flathead, Sealy, Missoula area. The other thing that really became apparent is the lack of housing for humans there and the impact we're seeing in that area of people camping in light of not being able to find affordable housing. And I'm real commendations to Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks and our partners in trying to work with those populations to ensure we minimize conflicts, human bear conflicts. I think Ken McDonald already touched on Montana Senate Bill 337 and the efforts of Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks and Fish and Wildlife Service working on an MOU to how they're going to work together to address the limits, if you will, that bill puts on Fish, Wildlife and Parks ability to participate in relocations outside recovery zones in Montana. And then Ken also mentioned the relocation sites. And I want to commend as a land manager, Fish, Wildlife and Parks for reaching out to land managers so they could gather that information and get our feedback for their March commission report. A couple of other things just of note this year I want to speak to is Wildlife Services reported a record number of depredation reports and actions, 181. Normally they see about 108. And the livestock Board of Livestock, the Livestock Loss Board report out also paid out a record number of depredation payments, about $270,000. There was an unfortunate misunderstanding in the news media by that representative. He stated that if we kept paying at this amount, we would be out of money. It was reported in some news media outlets that they were out of money. And he wanted to go on record during our meeting to say that was not the case. That was not the intention of his quote. I want to thank Randy Arnold, the Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, for serving as an NCDE chair. We transitioned last spring. That Randy did a fantastic job for the last 2 years while I was vice chair. I want to talk about, again, we've talked a lot about turnover, but I really want to acknowledge Tim Manley. I know Ken McDonald brought that up during his report earlier. Our longtime, incredibly innovative and successful Flathead bear manager. And I want to point out the large scale work, and particularly recently when we've had some large scale land turnover. Some of the former Plum Creek, Burlington Northern land, some of that land coming into conservation easements, some of that land being with new owners. And Tim has been, along with Jim Williams, the regional manager there, been instrumental in taking advantage of the opportunities, looking to conceive, looking to, put that land in conservation easements or perhaps acquire it, and also working with those new owners to get their buy-in and support and partnership and bear conservation efforts. The other thing I really was not aware of until Jim was talking about it during our meeting, I was not aware of Tim's work related to particularly some of the heat imagery camera work that he developed, which was pretty fascinating. So Tim's retiring at the end of the month. He is going to be sorely missed, as is Ross Beatty with Montana DNRC, longtime wildlife biologist, longtime member of the committee, representative. And Ross is one of those people that truly did a fantastic amount of work in the background for his agency and the bears, but really never tried to take credit or be upfront with that. So a big thank you to Ross. I also want to acknowledge the loss earlier this year of Stacy Corville, longtime CSKT Nation bear manager. The passing of Stacy. Whisper Camel Means has replaced him. And then also Ben Connard is now, as he pointed out, is our acting office manager with Jody's move to a different position with Fish and Wildlife Service. And then Jeff Mao, the Glacier National Park Superintendent, will be retiring at the end of the year. And finally, I am retiring at the end of the year. Kurt Steele with the Flathead Forest has graciously agreed to take over the federal slot for the remainder of my term as chair. Gary Bertolotti of Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks is the vice chair. I want to give a big thank you to Dylan Tabish. This year, we did have a little bit of a bobble. You know, in the past, we have gotten into the habit, if you sign up on our mailing list, we would email out notices to folks that were on the mailing list. Those notices were emailed according to our records this year. However, we did have a few individuals that did not receive them. So our apologies for that, but I think it speaks to the new IGBC website and the newsletter subscription. That's what we're trying to get folks to do. So each of the subcommittees can be making notice of those meetings consistently. We did have 45 publics and news media attend our meeting. So obviously those notices did get out in some ways. We're just not sure why they didn't get to some folks. And it was also posted for a month on the IGBC website. But our apologies to folks that were missed with that, but hopefully with this new website that will make up for that. And then finally, Ken mentioned that on Monday, yesterday, December 6th, Governor Greg Gianforte announced the state of Montana would be petitioning for delisting of the NCDE population. That was, since that announcement was not made on Monday, that was not discussed during our meeting at all. That was not discussed or disclosed during our meeting December 1st. So did not figure into our meeting. And with that, that's the end of my report.
So David, if I may say, just Bill, I cannot let you go without actually saying this while I can look at you, of just thanks for all that you've done for the IGBC, the Forest Service, the Grizzly Bear, and just, you know, having been a good friend to many of us. And so wish you really well. You contributed a lot, and your pull will be felt. But how exciting. I know you've got, you know, good things with a family and plans. So I wish you the very best.
Thank you very much for your kindness, Jackie. I'll miss the work and the people for sure, but hopefully we'll stay in touch.
We will. And David, so that is the last subcommittee, is that correct?
It is. We should see if there's questions for Bill. Okay, and there may come from comment, public comment as well. And then we have one go back for the Selkirk Cabinet Yak. Ben, if you want to go ahead.
You bet. I feel like a news anchor with the control room talking in my ear. So after I went through the numbers, Wayne Caseworm pointed out that one of our figures was wrong. One of our values was wrong. It should be noted that the Selkirk rate of increase is actually 2.9%. Our slide showed just over 1. So significant difference, and good catch by Wayne. So thanks for the go back. We'll correct the materials and get those to you.
Thanks, Ben. So yes, Jackie, that is the full suite of subcommittee activity, and it is, like I said, it is quite varied. It is quite, sort of vigorous. Mature. These are mature partnerships in each of these geographies. They have slightly different sets of players. There are clearly some commonalities, and so what I'm going to do this evening is collect the answers to those questions and try to synthesize those for you a little bit, particularly the questions that relate to this committee, the executive committee, of what issues are they putting forward to you, and where would it might be helpful to get that larger scale direction. So that's my sort of facilitation thought in listening to those subcommittee meetings. And again, it is incredibly impressive, the work that is being done.
And David, that's what I wanted to say, because I gave kudos to the first one out of the gun, right, with Greater Yellowstone, but everyone that reported out, I think, clearly showed and indicated that critical work is happening at the subcommittee level, important work's happening. And so I think it's a reaffirmation of, we have our exec work, but there is good continuity going down to the subcommittees. And so just a huge thank you and recognition to everybody for that work, because it really, coalesces under the exec committee and I think moves us forward into the future. So just want to recognize that stands out for me.
Okay, any other thoughts, observations? We'll have time tomorrow as well, because we're a little bit past time for the notice time for public comment. I want to make sure that we get thoughts and reactions and input from the members of the public that have been participating in this meeting throughout the day. So I guess is Dylan Tabish on? How would you like to? How do we do this, Dylan?
Yeah, so we can make an announcement to members of the public. If you have a comment you'd like to make, to please raise your hand. There at the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand function. And then I will unmute you. And if you could please state your name, where you're from, and if you're affiliated with an organization, and make your comment. You can also type in your question or comment into the Q&A if you'd rather to do it that way, and I can read it. So just kind of pausing now for folks. There is one hand up, so I will get to that person next. But if there's others who have a comment or question for the group, please raise your hand. So Claudia Narcisco, I see your hands up. If you could unmute yourself and make your comment, please state your name and where you're from. And so you just need to click unmute there, Claudia, on your computer.
Okay, thank you for reminding me to unmute. Actually, I had a question that I submitted a few minutes ago, and I was just checking to see that it had a response, and it did, from Sandy. And my question was something that Bill Avey related to about I-90 corridor, because the Bitterroot ecosystem apparently is working with Five Valleys Land Trust, and I can't remember who else, on passage across the Bitterroot. And my concern is connectivity and linkage across the Clark Fork, which is essentially I-90. So Sandy just said she wasn't, the response to my question was she'll have to double check on that. But that's a really important connectivity corridor that we need to be aware of, as well as the Bitterroot. I mean, all of them are. I was thinking earlier, after hearing Ken McDonald's discussion, that and Governor Gianforte's petition, which I'm not clear about all the details yet, but this has been going on for a really long time, this IGBC. And even in recent years, we've had, and the amount of how many people are on this call, and we're talking, we're not talking GS7s and GS9s, we got what, 12, 13, 14, 15s on this call. And in the past, they've gone to, in person. I mean, plus all the support across the forest and the different agencies, the amount of money that has gone into this, taxpayer funds. So it's really disappointing at this late stage to have the state of Montana and now Wyoming, I learned on this during this meeting, take independent actions to delist the bear outside of the normal protocols. And it's not like we have a stellar management. There's been a couple of things in the newspaper recently. There's been, national news concerning 3 mortalities, human caused mortalities. And I'm not exactly, I think it was probably in Idaho. And that was on the Washington Post just a few days ago, a few weeks ago, or a few months ago. I think it was the New York Times that ran a big article on wolf management. And now there's 600 to 900 bisons. I mean, we're hitting the trifecta out here as far as national news and how we're handling our iconic wildlife. So to hear that Gianforte has issued a petition, and I didn't hear anything about the governor's Bullock's Grizzly Bear Advisory Council incorporating some of their recommendations in that. So it's just a little bit, that's just the tip of the iceberg from what I was thinking, but it's a little bit distressing, the disrespect and disregard for all of the work and taxpayer funding that has gone on for God knows how long. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Claudia. Any others who have a comment or question for the group? I'm going to mute you there, Claudia. All right, so Kristen Combs, your hand is up. If you could please unmute yourself and state your name and where you're from. Thank you.
Hello, this is Kristen Combs. I'm the Executive Director at Wyoming Wildlife Advocates. I just wanted to thank the IGBC for the Bear Smart Communities project and trying to develop some protocols for that. It sounds like, there are many different communities all throughout the Northern Rockies who are really, dealing with some of the same issues around storing attractants properly and making sure that there are, things in place to keep bears from getting out of attractants. And here in Jackson, I'm sure that you're all aware of, Grizzly Bear 399, which was mentioned earlier, and her 4 cubs. And so as we as a community are sort of just dipping our toes into something that should have been, really thought about a long time ago, at least there's some sort of a template, which is really helpful for us to follow, and just, some guidance as we sort of get off the ground and get some of this stuff into action. So coordination amongst, both the community and federal and state agencies is going to be really important as we move forward on that. And I just wanted to sort of offer some thanks to Lori Roberts and Kim Johnson with People and Carnivores for helping with that process, and looking forward to working more with both IGBC and the local community here to get Jackson to a better place and Teton County to a better place. So that's just upcoming stuff, and we have a long road ahead of us, but I feel like there's been some good work, at least to helping make it so that, we're not starting from scratch, and certainly nobody's reinventing the wheel here. It's just a matter of getting all the information into one place so that, we all have it to sort of work toward this bigger goal. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Kristen. Any other comments for the group? And I do see someone's out there with a phone number. Not sure if you're using the Zoom app or not, but if you aren't, you can do *9 and that will raise your hand from the phone. Otherwise, if any other folks have a comment or a question for the group, please raise your hand or type it into the Q&A. And I'll just pause here, David and Jackie, as long as you guys would like.
What was my 7-second rule, but maybe we should go a minute or two. Not seeing anything.
Not seeing anything. Again, if folks want to raise their hand, that's the best way for me to know that you have a question or comment. Also, there will be public comment opportunities at the next 2 days meeting too. So if something comes up from today, you're gonna have other opportunities as well. But not seeing any hands or questions come in, David and Jackie. So
Well, as Dylan said, we have 2 more days and 2 more opportunities. So, you know, I don't want to hold folks on, and we're close to the hour anyway. So if we don't have anybody, I'd say we can move. Oh, Claudia, did you come back?
it does look like Claudia raised her hand again. So yeah, go ahead, Claudia. You have another.
It's probably just my own oversight, and I didn't notice it before. But is the Department of Livestock has that agency or sub-agency or whatever they are, have they been involved in the NCDE for a period of time, Bill? Or did I just miss that? Or are they new?
They're fairly new, but they've been coming to the meetings, I want to say at least the last 6-7 years, something like that, maybe longer.
Right, but are they, but you've listed them formally this time as one of the cooperating agencies. So I don't know if have they been sitting at the table for that length of time? For the
Yes,
NCDE?
that's my memory of it,
Okay,
Claudia.
thank you. I just missed it. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Thank you for the clarification, Claudia. I'm going to mute you again and put your hand down. But if any other questions here, your moments of opportunity to ask questions. Oh, and so Mike, it looks like Mike raised his hand. So Mike Bader, please unmute yourself, state your name and where you're from. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dylan. Mike Bader here in Missoula, independent consultant, and really just want to put in a pitch for some of the things that Jamie Jonkel's been working on here, and that you know, the time has finally arrived where we had a grizzly with 3 cubs show up right on the edge of Missoula, and we've got some real issues up there. And so I know it's a city issue, but hoping that somehow the IGBC can weigh in and maybe contribute some funding to get things kicked into gear up there, because we've got black bears everywhere, and it's just going to get dangerous, and we could lose that female pretty easy if she comes back next spring. So thanks.
Thank you, Mike. All right, any other comments out there? Okay, Derek's raised his hand. So Derek, please unmute yourself and state your name and where you're from.
Thanks, Dylan. Derek Goldman with the Endangered Species Coalition in Missoula. I just wanted to add in my thoughts and, you know, words of thanks and recognition for all the folks who are retiring, Tim and Jeff, and, you know, before them, appreciate the work of Mike and Stacy. What a loss. Appreciate all their work. We've probably lost over a century of combined on the ground grizzly bear management knowledge, you know, in these last few months. And, you know, it's not easily replaced, but just want to say I appreciate all their work over all the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Any other comments? All right, I'm not seeing any. David and Jackie.
David, do you have anything else, or should we close it out? Should I close it out?
Well, I just wanted to thank Dylan for and Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks for providing this Zoom platform for the meetings this week. Each of our subcommittees has figured things out in different ways, and it's we've benefited from this partnership. And thanks for running that section of the agenda there, Dylan. Again, so tomorrow we're diving into the IGBC level programs. To give you some where they are currently and where they might go, and then what I'm going to try to do is get you something to think about in terms of 2022 looking ahead. So look for that as well.
Okay, yeah, and the other things to note for tomorrow, we're going to kick off at 9:30 with the West Yellowstone Fatality Border Review. So I think folks will have some interest in that. And then the black bear update from Jackson, and as David said, some of the deeper work and some discussion around the Bear Smart Community Program. And so just gratitude again for everyone showing up and spending the day with us. I hope you'll show up again tomorrow, and tomorrow's Wednesday and Thursday. I've lost track of what day of the week it is, but I really appreciate the engagement. Hope we get more engagement. David and I talk, and Matt and I were talking a little bit earlier of that we really need folks to engage and bring, your thoughts and your experience and your perspective into this discussion. And, I'm a gap filler. I will try to herd as much as possible, and David's doing an awesome job, but I know there's a lot more input and information and value out there than just us. And so I just ask all of you to think about how you can engage and ask questions and take us into a little deeper conversation, maybe on some of these topics. The presentations are great, but they're really intended to spur conversation. They're really intended to spur thinking. They're really intended to, help us, move to a different place. And so just, ask that you come maybe tomorrow, if you come back, each of you come in with one question, think about it tonight and think about what we talked about today, look at the agenda and help us be better. Because that's what we really want. And, as chair, I've got one more year left, and we all come in with goals of, what are we looking for? And for me, and David and I have been talking about this quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, we really want robust engagement from all the interested parties, from all the agencies, from all the land managers, from the public, from the tribes, from our partners up in Canada. And so help us with that. We're committed, but we know you all are committed too, and you have a wealth of information and knowledge that could help us. So just ask you to think about that tonight and come ready to help us the next 2 days. I ad-libbed, David, so there. Had to make my plea. All right. So that's it, David?
That is it. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Thank you all.